I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Ansorgi?
Here.
Commissioner Rushton?
Present.
Chairman Bunnett?
Here.
Commissioner Wessel?
Here.
Commissioner Sotis Little?
Here.
Commissioner Rettenbach?
Here.
And Commissioner Lautner?
Present.
Thank you. So then that brings us to communications, proclamations, and presentations. We have the administrator update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's hay fever season for me, so I'm all congested today. Happens every year at this time of year, so. Okay, the biggest news, we think we solved the mystery of the feedback coming from the speakers here. They have to be, because the way the building is built, and the walls here, everything, they have to be out here. So as long as they stay out here, we think it's going to work. We had Gary O'Connor come, he's done a lot of testing, and it seems to be working if they're staying in one spot there. So we're going to just keep them there, see if it works. Because it's the angle, it's typical, but the system works fine. It's just the way the building is built, with the overhang here, and the way it's wired, that's where the feedback comes in, because they cross sectional and everything. So we'll try it there, see if it works. Hopefully we got it solved. So it's nothing to do with any of you up there, or any cell phones or anything else. It's strictly the way, the strange angles in the building here. So anyway, hopefully it'll work. So tomorrow is the 18th anniversary of 9/11. I believe it's been 18 years ago. I believe the commissioners were in a meeting that day in Leelanau.
It would have been this meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was
So,
a Tuesday.
if you ever get a chance to go to New York, it's definitely worth going to a 9/11 museum. Very somber place. I toured it 2 years ago, and it took most of the day to do there to see everything there. But it puts it really in perspective how many people lost their lives, over 3,000. And as you know, first responders are still having health issues from that day, 18 years later. Is there a ceremony in Glen Arbor tomorrow?
Yes,
Because they usually have it there. Is that at 9 o'clock?
I believe so.
Yeah. Every year we go out and check on the islands, and this year we had 3 commissioners who were first time on the trip. So as you can tell, we had Commissioner Rushton, Commissioner Ansorgi, and Commissioner Lautner went. And the Park Service went with us. I think it's a great experience. Any comment that you want to make from the 3 of you that went?
I would just say, being the first time I've ever seen the island, I was overwhelmed by the actual size of the island. I didn't realize how big they were and how well attended they were. The amount of people that were out there and the fact that we're responsible for them was interesting.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
I just want to say that life on the island is so much different than life over here. And the people that visit the island, they return annually for years to care for the infrastructure and the grounds. And it's really heartwarming to see the work that they do over there, because without them, I think we would lose a lot of the value that those islands provide. So I would just like to commend the volunteers that come out year after year and work their little hearts out with little. They go over there on their own dime, and life is a bit more challenging there because, you know, they just can't run off to the grocery store and buy the food they want to eat for dinner. So I just want to say thank you to all the volunteers.
Anything?
I was pleasantly surprised with the cooperativeness of the Park Service, especially on the South Island with the County Road Commission, that they are attempting to work together. And I know, in the past when the park took over a bunch of the property, there was a lot of animosity, but I was pleasantly surprised with the cooperativeness expressed by the Park Service.
Good. Did you tour the former hotel on North Mat too, Island, that they're restoring, all the volunteers?
No.
Katie,
No.
yes, the Katie
Oh, the Katie,
Oh, the
Shepherd.
Katie House?
Katie
Yeah,
Shepherd,
yeah.
yeah, we did.
Oh,
I mean, that's a great example of the volunteers.
Yes.
yeah.
When I first started going out there, it was in terrible shape
Yeah.
compared to what it looks like now. So
It's
that's just
beautiful
wonderful.
today. They've done some extensive work, woodwork. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
So it was interesting, the park ranger on North Mat who told me he watches as people get off the boat because that's more rustic. He can tell within 30 seconds whether they're first-time campers, veterans, or just recreational campers. In 30 seconds, the type of equipment they bring, he could tell. People actually bring DVDs and VCRs and think there's plug-in and Wi-Fi out there. Not the case. Well, I'm glad you had a great trip, and thank you for the sheriff's office for helping us get you out there. Also, we have a retiree, and I was hoping Tom would be here, but he couldn't make it. But Mr. Hunter, want to just give us an update here?
Sure. Well, Tom worked for the county for many years, and... All right, sir. Anyhow, one thing I gotta say about Tom was he really knew the rules. He knew all of the ins and outs of the code and always made it quite clear to the many contractors that built here to give them direction. And he was the kind of guy that took his job very seriously and always showed up for work. I only worked with the guy for a couple of years, so I didn't have a long experience with him, but I do know now that he's very happy. He's retired, he's working for the Park Service. He's about, not for the Park Service, for the Friends of the Park. And he's a volunteer, and they have a new piece of equipment now where if you're disabled in any way, you can get on this thing. It's kind of like an ATV, and you can go up the dunes, you can go all over the place. So that's where he's working. And he's
Imagine
very
a
happy.
combination wheelchair and ATV combined. Because Tom came and showed us photos of it. It's a great thing. And I believe he was with the county for 27 years. And so he's retired, and wish him the best of luck. And he seems very happy. We're going to have an internal party for him probably next month at some point when he's available. But he got this, he came back to us on a part-time basis this past year, and I guess he liked the part-time more and more and more. So he's going to get less and less of us. So anyway,
For
yeah.
him.
So thank you, Tom, for your service. Roof project, they're actually ahead of schedule. We had a very few minor glitches that they have taken care of. I've really been impressed with Lutz. They do daily update, they do weekly update. They cut one line, which happens. They took full responsibility, kind of paid for it. And I've been very impressed with them. They've been working here on weekends. Almost every weekend they've been here working. And the weather's been cooperative, except for last week we had some rain. And there was a little bit of leak in the building, but they took care of it right away. So I think we'll be wrapping up the project here fairly soon, and it's been a good experience working with them. And on this building, on the HVAC project, we had a contractors meeting last Friday. Tomorrow, the consultant's coming to meet with all the department heads, and we're going to outline a schedule of what's going to happen in which area, so everyone knows in advance. But that seems to be going well also. So you'll be hearing more about that probably next month. Bard partnership, it's still going well. There's a new book out. I meant to bring it today. I didn't bring it with me, but this book was published about 2 months ago, and the proceeds of it are going to go to the historic barn. So if you get a chance, it's an easy read, a lot of photos in it, and just historic sites in Leelanau County. And I believe it's $25, I believe, but the proceeds go to the barn to help with that project. And so you'll be hearing more about that. But I picked up a copy. It's extremely well done. We had I thought, a very productive meeting last Friday, and Commissioner Russian, who's the chair of that, would you like to just give a brief update?
Sure. Friday's coalition meeting was well-attended, and our members are actively driven, and they have very high energy. Greg McMorrow discussed local grant opportunities for county-specific goals, and I'll talk about those in a minute. He also talked about the advantage of being members of the 5-county coalition. They were recently successful in an MMRE grant for $180,000, and it was discussed that their focus would be a robust media campaign. We think that that service will provide the region as a whole consistent messaging and both informational, prevention, and some positive media coverage. September was the launch date for that, so soon we will begin to see some of that advertisement or media information. Ken Kaufman, whose son was a victim of an opioid overdose and death, is the driving force on that 5-county coalition. He talked about a multi-level strategy across the nation, across the region, where we would connect with one another, share information, and work on different prevention ideas. Looking at root causes, prescription reduction, and preventing opioid deaths. Informational targets are students and parents through schools, healthcare providers who write prescriptions, and providers who fill prescriptions. We talked about teaching the alternative to pain management. It's something that we talked about. People need to relearn how to manage pain without opioids. Our discussions also included alcohol, vaping, and marijuana. April, our senior services director, is currently developing programming for seniors so they can recognize some of the pitfalls of the drugs, alcohol, and how it affects them and their families. But another area of concern is the abuse, possibly of family members who may take advantage of the elderly and rummage through their medicine cabinet. So that could be a problem. Lori Spencer was instrumental in getting the Johnny ads in our school bathrooms in regards to vaping. Ty Wessel suggested that the county support vaping detection devices within our schools. Mike Carmine, the superintendent at Sutton's Bay, and the school teams, because there's a variety of members, they're working directly with student groups for prevention among their peers. And we're going to find a little bit more about what they're doing this week. October is Prevention Month, and programming will soon be announced.
In fact, we met on that topic yesterday. 6 of us met at Sutton's Bay Schools, and we're hoping to come up with a series of speakers in October. They'll be at every school and also open to the public. So we're working on that.
So we'll look for everybody at those informational meetings.
Mr. Wessel, anything you want to add?
Deb did a nice job.
Yeah.
I'm pleased that we had representation from 3 of the school districts and tribal members and numerous representatives from agencies. So it's a good group.
We had 3 people from the districts at yesterday's meeting also. For them to drive from other districts for a meeting during the school day is very difficult, but obviously they've used this as a priority. And we are looking at some funding options to buy vaping detectors for all the schools. And so we hope to have that also done. So it was a very productive first meeting of the fall. We're going to meet again the first Friday of October. And this is not a repeat from last month. but the same, different photo. You want to give us an update, Commissioner?
Yes, I have a new granddaughter. Her name is Everly Alexis. And she's healthy and doing very well. So it's mom and dad.
So 2 and 4 weeks, right?
5 weeks.
5 weeks
Yeah.
apart, yeah.
Yeah.
There's not one next month, is there? I don't-
Well, not that I know of.
Oh, okay.
But
All right.
I've got room. There's plenty of room.
Well,
for more.
congratulations. Now you have 5?
5.
5, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All here.
That's great.
Oh,
Thank you. Then that would bring us to
Sure.
Veterans Affairs update.
Morning.
good morning.
You should have a little bit of information in your packet that I provided.
For the audience, could you just introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Michael Ruff. I'm the Director of County Veterans Affairs for Grand Traverse County. We also have an MOU with Leelanau that we provide veteran services as well. In your packet, you have some information about some important updates that have to do with our counties, both counties. And I'd like to say thanks again for allowing us to come up here and serve the veterans and the dependents in Leelanau County. We are working on more and more things to expand the reach of those who have not even made it into the office or even know about it. There is a Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency grant that got passed in the state last year. And oddly enough, it got passed where any county who has a county Veterans Affairs can apply for this grant. And if you apply, you get it. It's not, you might get it, but if you apply, you automatically get it. Well, the law was passed that each county could get $25,000, but somehow somehow it got amended to that each county got $50,000. And then you get additional monies based on per capita of veterans in your county. Well, we didn't take it because the rules of what you could use it for changed dramatically from the time the law passed and then when it got amended. So goofy things like there was a county who asked for a $13,000 drone to deliver groceries to disabled veterans in the winter. But yet when they looked at the specs on the drone, the first line says, don't fly in inclement weather. So they couldn't award it to some things. To a Veterans Affairs office on the other side of the state asked for massage tables, towels, and sheets for their staff to provide massages for veterans. So we're not going to that extreme. We're looking at utilizing the grant here in Leelanau and the grant in Grand Traverse to do some advertising, whether it be billboard, radio, and maybe something like a bus wrap. I've already been getting numbers of what those costs would be. But this year, because the law was amended last year, the legislature has said $4.2 million they're appropriating, which means $50,000. But the governor's office is saying no, 2.1, which means 25,000 each. Well, they amended it to say 50, so they're not holding to that. So we'll see when they actually finalize a budget where we're going to be at. For Grand Traverse, if it was at $25,000, it would put us around $67,000. For here, if it was $25,000, you'd be probably around $30-something thousand. We'll find out again when the budget's finished. But I've been working with Chet on what we could use that money for up here because it would be specifically for your county as well. I would just help come up with some new programs, advertising. And then later on in this packet, it talks about talks with Peshabi Town of the cost of us, whether they burden that or whether that grant's used, some of that money's for that. But there's been talks since January of they would like someone there in their administrative offices to provide some services. because it's been hard to get into them. I actually met with the board chairman last February, and I've been waiting till then to kind of get this finalized. It's quite a while. He's a hard man to get a hold of and to get things through. So I've put a packet together for him yesterday, in fact. So we continue talks to see what's going to happen on that end and what that looks like. That's just going to partner with what we do here, where the MOU you guys signed last year expanded to where we do one outreach a month in Leelanau. Well, it's been in the basement of this building, and we've had very light traffic there. And what we want to do starting in January, we're going to probably change that and move it around the county to coffee shops, libraries, stuff like that. One place we had in town, it was in the basement with no elevator, so we couldn't utilize that space. We're trying to find something that anybody that shows up, they'll be able to handle that with if they have mobility issues. We are forming or starting an official Veterans Treatment Court for the 86th District. Actually, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we are in the basement of the courthouse. NADCP, which is the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. They are the authority and trainer of all specialty courts, drug courts, DUI courts, veterans courts. They'll be here this week in the courthouse training the team for our Veterans Treatment Court. So far, they've put all the veterans under one probation officer. They are pretty sure that they're all going to see Judge Cooney once this program kicks off. He's to be the judge for the Veterans Treatment Court, but it's not officially started. We're in the forming and training process to find out eligibility and criteria and all that stuff. So that's kind of an exciting part for us. My role on that team is I'm the mentor coordinator. So veterans who are doing well in life and are not criminally involved, or who have been through another program and have graduated successfully, they could come back and be like a sponsor or mentor for the veteran. So that's also another exciting aspect that we can work with for veterans. Bring them in and have them support other veterans through this program. That'll be exciting to see it kick off. The last page is the stat page. You can see by the numbers, the blue is 2018 and the orange or red, however it looks on your screen, is 2019. The increases of client visits up here every month are increasing, except for July. It kind of stayed the same. But you see the numbers are going up. So the outreach we've been doing, the radio conversations we have, where people are listening of, we're here, come visit, utilize the services, are making an impact. I wish I had numbers, monthly numbers, to go back in time, but this report I will keep, and it will show progression from year to year to year. Probably 3 years at a time, as it might get a little confusing. So that's all I really have. Anybody have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Can you give a reason to why there's such an increase in the number of visits?
Well, I believe the increase is due to our outreach. We've been on the radio this past year a lot more. We have Friday events. So the first Friday of the month, we're in Kingsley Library. The second Friday of every month, we're at the Interlochen Library. And then the third Friday of every month, we're here in the Governmental Center in the basement. And then we obviously have someone who primarily does outreach in our office besides me. He goes out to all kinds of events, the Senior Expo here, the one in Grand Traverse, all kinds of events that aren't even veteran-specific events, to try and get the word out that state, not only is there an office in Grand Traverse, but our literature says there's an office here. So I think that helps. Plus, last year when we changed staff members, there was a senior staff member who'd been here for several years, and we switched. sometimes people like one and not the other. And in my business, I never take that personally, because someone may come in and just not like working with me, kind of like someone who goes to see a therapist, whatever. So maybe that's a part of it, a very small part, but I think it's just due to the amount of outreach we've been doing.
Well, I think it sounds great that you're going to move around a little bit and go to the coffee shops and so on, and rather than just have it down here in the basement, so.
Yeah, we had done that because we had room here. Some of the places we had scoped out at the beginning didn't have a lot of room, and we wanted to allow for expansion. We're like the Interlochen Library, that one has always been very, very busy. The library itself does a lot of advertising for it, so.
Beautiful new library.
Yeah, it's our busiest location.
Commissioner Sutis.
I have a couple of questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
You were mentioning they're starting the drug court. How big a problem is that, percentage-wise, with our veterans?
So the Veterans Treatment Court, all those things are still new, because I haven't run numbers or been able to track it. But nationally, they say that usually veterans are about 8% of the jail or prison population.
I apologize because I don't seem to find your report in here, but, and you may have answers to what I'm about to ask. Do you have numbers in terms of distribution of the population age-wise for our county?
For veterans?
For veterans.
I can get you that information. I can send it back up to Chet. I don't have it here with me.
I was just curious. It's nice to see numbers going up, but who is actually participating might be an interesting way to look at how you're reaching them and maybe other ways to do so, but you're certainly trying in all directions. And the other final question was on the grant you were referring to. What were the restrictions? I mean, what are they asking to fund when the grant came out? What were the guidelines that you're trying to stay within?
Yep. So again, it was kind of weird because at first they came out and said, this is what you can spend it on. At the beginning they said, it has to be, you're expanding your office by technology, so you could use it for new computers or software or any of those things, technology, or you can expand it by bringing in a new staff member, or if you're starting a whole new office. So they were really restricted at the beginning. Well, when we started talking to the state, going, well, what about counties who have a well-established office and have great computers? What can we use this money for? And he came back and he said, the legislature said, there's no restrictions. You can use it for whatever you want. So that's why people had bought a new van with it. There's a county that their treasurer is on the first floor as soon as you come in, and it's a lot larger area, and they didn't feel safe. They wanted on a place with a little bit more security, and the Veterans Affairs was on the 6th floor. So they used that money. They swapped. The treasurer moved upstairs, and the Veterans Affairs moved on the 1st floor, and they used that money to remodel both areas to make it easier for veterans to just come in the front door and be there and provide some security on 6th floor for the treasurer. So they allowed almost anything, I mean, versus some really outlandish requests. So now they're getting tighter and going, well, now they're saying you can't buy vehicles because who technically owns that? Because you're using state money, and when it turns out, does that van or vehicle go back to the state where the money came from? So they're trying to narrow the field a little bit as far as advertising, staff, additional staff, granted staff, and expansion and back to that technology wise.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Hansorgi.
I've asked this question before, but the Secretary of State has the opportunity for veterans to get a veteran designation on their driver's licenses. Is there any action as far as allowing people like you to access that list, to make that outreach a little easier?
Not yet, but I can tell you, I've only been here, if you remember me calling last year, December will be 2 years in this position. And I have met, per my report, with the new director of MVAA and trying to build that relationship. I don't have access to it yet, maybe possibly, but with us building a relationship with MVAA, I think more things can open up. New director, she just came in last month. already working with her. What happened is she called my office. Unbeknownst to me, she was coming up to the fair, and someone from her office called me the week before on a Wednesday and said, she's coming up, do you have time to meet with her? I said, sure, absolutely. And they said, what kind of topics would you see affecting veterans that maybe we can help with? And I said, well, an easy one is the extra fees that veterans pay for like combat wounded or Purple Heart plates. Why are they getting penalized for paying extra for those plates when they served their country and they got wounded? And they're like, oh, that's a great one. And I said, well, what about hunting and fishing licenses for disabled veterans? Can you get rid of that fee? Because only 100% permanent total can get that for free now. And so when they came Monday, they met with me and they said, we liked your idea. We're already working with the Secretary of State. They're going to get rid of those extra fees for those plates. I said, awesome. I said, what about the DNR? They said, well, that's a lot of lost money if they got rid of that. And I go, no offense, but charge anybody who hunts or fish an extra $1 or 50 cents to make that money up somewhere. You can find ways to do it. So I don't think getting the information from the Secretary of State's would be that far-fetched, because they're already working with me and our state association board to create a better partnership. So I'll talk to them more next month at our meeting to see what's possible.
You know, that's the biggest problem is, you know, veterans don't take advantage for whatever reason, and, you know, you can't help them if you can't reach them.
Yeah, and I can tell you the number of veterans who come into my office, ask for an ID, which we don't produce IDs in my office, and I tell them, you just go down to Barlow, which is not even a mile down the road from us, give them your DD-214, and they will put veteran on it, and they're like, nah, I don't want to go through all that. I'm like, okay. And the downside is some of those veterans that have veteran on it have never enrolled in VA healthcare or have a compensation rating. So they're not enrolled in VA healthcare to where they're counted by the VA every year. So it's a hard thing to reach everybody, I can tell you.
Commissioner Rush.
I was just wondering when the specialty court would be up and functioning.
That's a good question. We don't have a hard, fast date. It has been said we're going to try for January. Those controls are outside of mine. I imagine it's up to the court administrator and or the judges. So we've been talking January. We were really waiting for this week to happen, because when NADCP comes in to train our team, we already have a template procedure and policy manual, but this training will lock all that down and put it in place for us, for the whole team, so they know what's going on.
Thank you.
I just had one question about, you talked about 8% of the prison, people in the jail are veterans.
That is what I read, yeah. Mhm.
So would they still have their benefits even if they are in jail?
So that's something that I'm working on with the National Board and with NACO, National Association of County Officials. So if you are in jail for less than 60 days, you will still have your benefits. The VA runs what's called a jail inmate match. It's just a program that runs, and if your name and social comes up in a prison system or jail system, they check it when you were put in, and then if it's longer than 60 days, they will cut off all your benefits.
Oh, really?
Now, if you're married and you have a spouse with kids back home and they were relying on that money, you can apply for what's called an apportionment, which is only 10% of your money. But working with NACO is now trying to work with states and the VA to say, hey, if we have someone in jail and they've not been formally prosecuted, they're just charged, then why would you take the benefits away? And I'll actually be in DC in 2 weeks talking to AMVETS, DAV to get everybody on board with NACO to try and help move that along. So,
Thank you.
mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, then that brings us to Northern Lakes Community Mental Health. Mr. Kovacs here. Please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Chair, I should say. Thank you for having me. Well, it's good to be back meeting with all of the commissioners and Administrator Chet and Allison. Thank you for your help. I'm here because of our board's interest in having more contact with our county commissions in our 6 counties. Grateful that Ty Wessel continues to serve on our board, and also Betty Boucher. So we have 2 great board members representing Leelanau County. And Betty's on a committee that's called the Nominating and Leadership Development Committee, and they are the ones who look at a variety of things, but one of those things is relationships with our counties. And the public mental health system is related to the counties. It's our structure, it's our tie to the counties that really makes it a public system. So we're responsible to you for what we do. You provide us, through your commissioners and representatives on our board, a tie to your county to tell us what it is, what's needed in your county, what is it that's going on that we should be aware of. So we're really pleased with that relationship. Today, it's a very brief presentation that I have for you. I'll probably be back next month with my usual more detailed description of services and so forth, but also we'll hopefully talk to you about some of our programs and bring some of our staff who are directly related in those programs, so you have a better idea of what we do. Today's presentation is just a one-pager. You have it electronically and you have a hard copy, and so we thought that we would talk to you a little bit about Northern Lakes Community Mental Health Authority as an economic engine. We talk to you all the time about services, but what's the economic impact of your and the other 5 counties' commitment to maintain Northern Lakes Community Mental Health Authority? What's the economic impact? And up top there's a little review of services. We served over 5,600 people in 2018. We provided service to 400 people in our My Choice program, which is a nursing home alternative program. We provided over 2,000 face-to-face crisis interventions and over 7,200 crisis calls. And I'll just segue just a moment. Crisis services are available to anybody in all our 6 counties. You do not have to have a serious mental illness or an intellectual or developmental disability. So I really want to encourage that if people feel like they're in crisis, it doesn't have to be just a danger to yourself or to others. If you or someone you know feels that you're in crisis and you define the crisis, then we say call us. Because we have a crisis number, and that's something that we provide to any citizen in our 6 counties. You don't have to have a mental illness, or you don't have to have an intellectual developmental disability. So we feel that's a very important and preventative service, because we want to catch things as quickly as possible. So on the economic engine front, we used a methodology that comes out of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And what we calculated was that we create about $140 million in economic activity in our 6 counties. And that's a combination of our annual budget is about $71 million, so we get various funding sources to provide all the services that we do. And through that activity, our staff pay income taxes, local taxes. So there's a lot of direct, with those wages get spent in the communities, and they help support other people in the community who have businesses. And then on the other side of that, we calculate that we support about 641 jobs. 310 of those are our staff's positions. We have about 310 employees at any one time. But again, the ripple effect. We support bankers and grocers and beauticians and car mechanics and so forth by our economic activity. So we're very proud of what we do from a service provision standpoint, but we also are very proud that we contribute to the economies of our 6 counties. So there are 2 other pieces of information that I've left behind. The annual report, which you've seen before, and this is one of the best. We didn't do this last year, but we reprinted it. We did it this year. This has a tremendous amount of information about Northern Lakes, what we spend our money on for services, how to contact us. That crisis number is on here. This is a 4-fold, so you can fold it up, put it in your purse, put it in your wallet, glove compartment, you never know. I keep one in my wallet. So this has a lot of information. So again, I'm really pleased that you had me and had the opportunity to share this information. And Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to entertain any question.
Any questions on it?
I like this.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Seeing
And
none-
there's some extras over here, so that if you want to take extras or distribute them, please do.
Okay, I don't see any questions, so thank you very much.
Okay.
We really
Any comment,
appreciate it.
Mr.
Oh,
Chair?
sure.
I'm proud to be a board member for the Northern Lakes Community Mental Health and very impressed with the staff and Carl's leadership. And I think Betty would echo that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ty. Appreciate that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So then that would bring us to approval of the agenda. Commissioner Ansorgi?
Assuming there are no changes, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. And that brings us to public comment. Please come forward.
Gwen Allgaier, Cleveland Township. Good morning. Just looking at the agenda, I'm really pleased that we are going to hear from Skip Pruce on the government's role in protecting our water. Water is our treasure and necessary for sustenance of our lives. So I'm glad that report will be done, because I don't think laissez-faire is appropriate when it is what we depend on for our very sustenance. I also noticed that the Grand Traverse Band's 2% allocation will be discussed today, the yearly discussion. I hope, because the Grand Traverse Band has the intention to lift people up with the money they allocate, and I think that's a really tremendous goal. I hope that our request for allocation will share that goal of lifting up the people in Leelanau County and supporting especially those less fortunate, who are struggling but important neighbors. So thank you.
Thank you. Please come forward.
I don't know if you, do you have a sign-up sheet or anything like that?
No. You just have to state your name, please.
Sure. I'm Barbara Stamaris. I'm in Solon Township, and I'm here today because when I heard that Skip Pruce was coming to speak about government's role in protecting water, that drew me here. I come with a question about myself. What is my role in protecting water? And that's why I'm here and why I want to speak to you, is I'm trying to figure that out. So I did a little thinking early this morning about all the things we know that Michigan is first in and known nationwide or worldwide for. I don't need to repeat, but the Great Lakes, more shoreline than any other state except for Alaska. I think I heard that Leelanau County has more water than other counties. And one that maybe you haven't heard, I learned from my sister that in 2017, Popular Science gave Michigan a centerfold on being the place that most likely, or, they picked out Michigan as a place that might be a refuge if climate change becomes worse because of all of our resources, and especially the UP not being so developed. So those are all the great things about our state, but we also have some one-of-a-kind distinctions in not such a good way. And I think that the Record Eagle has recently done a good job, and I like to tie together two editorials that I went back to. One was on July 7th, and they titled it, "Michigan Should Take the Lead in Water," and one that was just a couple days ago saying transparency needs more than lip service. And I think there's a real tie-in between the environmental things that almost all, I would say all Michiganders, it's bipartisan, it's just across the board. We want to protect our water. But when we lack transparency, and the Center for Public Integrity put Michigan 50th of the states in transparency, and our legislators, state legislators, you can't FOIA, you can't get at the documents behind what's moving them, and so we need a change in that. And the one that really blows my mind is, how can the Great Lakes state be the only state that doesn't have a uniform sanitary code for the whole state? So I think most all of us would think that that's what we should have, but you can't take a leap. That's, I think it's better to start with local and take care of what we can in our own area. Of course, Flint, Michigan comes to mind when you think of the lack of transparency and the emergency manager that they put in, and I think there's a direct tie-in to what happened with their environmental issues. So my plea today is really to think about your role in protecting water. I have an individual role. We're going to hear about the state's role. And I think the county commissioners all over this state have a responsibility, just as I do. And I think the citizens that are here show how much we care about wanting septic regulations and caring about our water. And I think the counties in Michigan need to take that same responsibility of moving toward getting our water cleaner, so that we can show the state what we all want, and maybe it'll get our whole state to move where we should. I guess I'll say one other thing. It's really hard for me to understand how anybody could oppose septic regulation and the benefits that we know come from it, except I can kind of understand how realtors are taking a position against it, because that's a real pocketbook issue for them. But I think we all have a responsibility, and I hope I can do mine, and I hope we can all do ours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Whedon from Centerville Township. And 15 years ago, I had a mentor and a friend who was a member of Leelanau Clean Water, which was started. And the concept of Leelanau Clean Water initially was that we really, really needed to have a septic ordinance. And Sarah Litch is a person that was so dear to me and to all of us, and she was a mentor to me in teaching us the importance of watersheds. So I'm here to honor her because she is deceased, and I sort of told her that I would continue on the path to see what I could do, and I want to thank everyone, the Board of Commissioners and Leelanau Clean Water and Flow, and so many people in their efforts of protecting what is truly one of the most beautiful places here to live. It's hard to imagine that there is a global water crisis and that daily people struggle to obtain the same resource, clean water, that we could easily take for granted. Awareness of what we do now will make a long-term difference to our health, to our economy, and our way of life in Leelanau County. So I urge you to continue with the process of establishing a responsible septic tank ordinance in Leelanau County. And again, thank you, Sarah Lynch.
Anyone else for public comment? Please come forward.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dennis Boucher from Elmwood Township. I usually forget to get that in, but I'm gonna make sure I get it in. I'm here again about that pesky old topic of 2% allocations. Wow. If I was Indians, if I was in the tribe, I'd probably say forget that bunch. But anyway, we have talked at times about how fiscally responsible this board is. I've heard several of you mention that all the time, especially when you're running for office. I think that these funds would do better. I don't care about the fiscal responsibility that much. I don't care about printers, and I think we have money anyway to buy those items. After all, this county has to be one of the wealthiest with all the tax. I know my taxes are high, and I don't even live on a lake. So I think we have a lot of tax revenue here to buy the stuff that we need. I think what we can do is take these allocated funds and put it to places like Carl just here, Northern Lakes, Leelanau Christian Neighbors, food banks, early childhood development. That would be money well spent. I would be proud of that, more than I am proud of your fiscal responsibility. That's where I would want that allocation to go. I think it's a heartfelt thing. I think if we help people who need help, by doing so, the old proverb, rising tide raises all ships. And pretty much we would improve our county if we use these funds in the proper and in a humanitarian way. Thank you.
Anyone, please come forward.
Good morning, my name is Celeste Crouch, and I live in Glen Arbor Township. I would like to begin by saying that I'd like to revisit the septic ordinance on point of sale by first mentioning that, as was previously brought up, that the state of Michigan doesn't have a uniform sanitary law. And they have turned it over, as you know, to regional health departments and counties and states, and counties and townships. And this is why I think this is a very bad idea, because townships have different SES status, and in Leelanau County, we have the same situation with varying degrees of affluence in the townships. And the townships that have a great deal of more affluence have passed their own township septic laws, and the reason I think ordinances, and the reason I think they have done so is because many of the people who come into the area and buy second homes aren't burdened by the notion of personally having to keep up a septic system, and those who live in these more affluent townships are not particularly as burdened as the less affluent townships by the cost of putting in a new septic system. And so for people, especially in these townships that have lived here all their lives and maybe inherited lakefront property from their families, and they hear about a septic ordinance that may burden them with a bill as high as $20,000 to put in a new septic system, they would view that ordinance as a huge threat. This is a huge financial threat to these people. And I'm sure that some of these people in these less affluent townships talk to those of you commissioners who represent them. And maybe you yourselves have lived here all your lives and know these people, and they're your friends. And so you can adopt this notion of why should the county come in and force people to be financially burdened by this septic ordinance? So it makes sense. It makes sense that we have a disparity between your positions on this commission and why we get the votes that we do. And it seems to me that if you, I think that the state of Michigan has done us a real disservice by turning it over to regional and county governments for this very reason. Yes, you can handle your local ordinances if they're not punitive financially, but when they're as big an item as this one, then you really pay attention. And then I ask you to look at the other 49 states in this union who have Republican, the Republican Party is in the majority in the state legislature, and they passed good sanitary laws, and other states with Democrat majority lawmakers, they also were able to do the same. And I'm just wondering how you four commissioners can ignore the hydrologists, the sanitary engineers, septic engineers, the health department people. You can just dismiss their expertise in the 49 other states, and you wonder why people in our county who live on the water are upset with your positions. And you've heard all the arguments about health and safety and the waterways and how we're all linked together, and you can ignore that. I find it really hard to believe. I understand your thinking, and I understand your constituents are perhaps very, very opposed. And maybe the only thing to do is to set up a county fund.
You're 5 minutes.
Okay, set up a county fund to help those people who are financially pressed, who can't afford to pay for a new septic system. Help them out. Show your compassion by helping them out. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we will move on to our agenda. And of course, the first item is from Mr. Skip, who is the government role and protective role.
Mr. Chair?
Could I? Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Go
who
ahead.
asked for this to be on the agenda?
We have two commissioners,
Okay,
Mr. Russell.
I just, ordinarily you would allow them the opportunity to speak to this before the presentation starts.
Okay, well, if he does, if you would like to, sure. That's
I
fine.
would like to just a second, and I'm very pleased that Skip is here. Skip, former director of the Michigan Department of Energy, Labor, and Economic Growth, former board member of FLOW, but I'm glad that Skip's here because I'm hoping we take one more opportunity to talk about our role in protecting our most valuable resources. Just this week, our beaches were closed for contamination. St. Mary's School in Lake Leelanau was made the 60 schools list of contaminated well water with plastics. We had arsenic in the soil out in the southern part of the county. We don't have a whole lot of control, but we do have a stewardship role. And I'm hoping that this is another opportunity to talk to Skip about our limited but very important role in protecting what all of our residents believe is so key and so essential. So I'm pleased that Skip is here. He did bring copies of the report for commissioners as well as they were in our board packet. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Wessel, and thank you, Chair Bunick and Vice Chair Lautner and Commissioners for allowing me to come and present to you. Just one thing about credential. I've taught energy economics at the University of Michigan, the Urb Institute. I've also founded a company, Five Lakes Energy, that has done energy economic modeling for 16 states across the country. So I'm not an economist, but I've received a Wegge Foundation grant, actually Flo did, to write a series of policy papers that is focused on the value of environmental protections and safeguards. And what we're speaking here are an analysis of, an economic analysis of environmental laws like the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act and the attendant regulations, and the economic effect on businesses, on commercial enterprises, those costs as weighed against the economic benefits of the health protections and environmental protections that accompany these environmental safeguards. So one aspect of this, and I apologize in advance because this gets complicated, is the relatively new discipline of ecological economics. And what that does is to seek to quantify and monetize the various benefits of ecology, of nature-based systems. So for instance, clean water provides potable water, drinking water. It recycles nutrients. It provides services for agriculture, irrigation. It's needed for industrial processes, for power generation. You may not know that 76% of all water withdrawals in the Great Lakes region is for thermoelectric cooling. And it also provides aesthetic benefits, recreational opportunities, commercial and sports fishing opportunities, and whatnot. When you add these all up, the benefits of nature and the services that ecology provides is really quite astounding. This is the latest report by an organ of the United Nations in 2019 involving the review of over 4,100 scientific studies and drafted and reviewed by over 100 scientists, indicates that right there, thank you. The value of ecological services is annually $60 trillion worldwide, $24 trillion in the Western Hemisphere, which is parenthetically interesting because in the Western Hemisphere, in the United States, Canada, and South America, that's only 13% of the global population, yet we enjoy and have the benefit of almost half of the ecological services that the world provides, that nature provides. So, looking at the Great Lakes, and really trying to condense this information that I'm presenting to you, we, back on the satellite view, just a moment on this, and I know you're all familiar with this, but it really is something absolutely extraordinary, absolutely globally unique. 21% of the entire world's fresh water supply, 84% of the fresh surface water supply in North America, and 95% of fresh surface water in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. So we are at the heart of the largest and certainly most valuable freshwater system in the world, existing no place else. There is 5,500 cubic miles of water in our Great Lakes, enough to cover the contiguous 48 states to a depth of 9.5 feet. So, next slide. So in Michigan, 1 in 5 jobs are water related or water dependent. Our Great Lakes regional economy is a $6 trillion economy. Were the Great Lakes region a separate nation, it would be the 3rd largest economy in the world. So we have tremendous water wealth. Of the global population of 7.8 billion people, 2 billion people, almost a third of the world's population, faces water scarcity issues every single day. 4 billion people, over half the world's population, experience water shortages at least 1 month per year, 12 months. A recent analysis required by federal law under the Resource Planning Act found that of the 204 water basins in the United States, 146 are water stressed, and more than half in future years will experience water shortages. 146 are experiencing today diminishment in yield from those formations. So what this means is that we have tremendous water wealth and that we really ought to appreciate it and we ought to be good stewards. I was asked to touch upon the septic issue, which clearly is very important to people in this community. And I know that you commissioners are very well schooled on this issue because I did review the really excellent minutes that you've had from past meetings on where you've taken up this issue. But just to underscore a few points in the remaining time that I have, you may be familiar with a recent scientific study by Michigan State University. They had teams survey the 64 river systems in the Lower Peninsula, and 100% of the river systems in the Lower Peninsula exhibited human fecal coliform bacteria. So every single river system has been contaminated with human bacteria. You don't believe that fact?
That is not what the study said. They found DNA evidence of enteric DNA. They did not find bacteria.
That is human-based. Okay, I'm trying to simplify this a bit. They also conclude in that study that the most likely source of this contamination are failing septic systems. And when a septic system is failing or is performing in a substandard fashion, it can contaminate groundwater. All groundwater, with the rare exception of perched aquifers, move, flow, and discharge somewhere at some time to surface water. So the economic consequence of this is that defective septic systems degrade the ecological services that groundwater and surface water ultimately provide. Now this is an economic issue, but it's also a property valuation issue. If you own a property, if you have a house that has a defective or substandard septic system or one that's failing, the value of your property is diminished. There's no question about that. There is also the potential that if you're a neighboring property owner, the value of your property may also be diminished as well. And you may be affected by this leaking system. There was a very recent report done by public sector consultants released in April 2018, and that report indicated, or it surveyed Clinton, Gratiot, and Montcalm counties, and found that potentially 900 million gallons of poorly treated or untreated human septic waste was being delivered to the groundwater and ultimately surface water. So it is a hugely important issue. You may be familiar with the fact of the algae blooms in Lake Erie. Failing septic systems are probably a contributor. What is the greatest contributor to those algae blooms is the nutrient loading of nitrogen and phosphorus from animal waste, from combined animal feeding operations. But the point is, the state of Ohio has done an economic analysis, and the coastal communities affected by these algae blooms are going to experience a loss of $272 million, an estimated loss annually as a result of diminished opportunities to use the benefits, make full use of the benefits of Lake Erie. So the point about the state not having a uniform standards for the design, construction, and maintenance and operation of septic tanks has been made today several times, and by default it is falling to county officials and township officials to do something to address this problem. I would suggest to you that as the last speaker indicated, there can be some hardships associated with an ordinance, but transactionally, it's the best possible time to address the problem at the point of sale. Most lending institutions already require inspections of septic systems, so we're talking about a smaller universe of sales that are not financed by banks. And transactionally, that's the point at which money changes hands and there may be resources available to address this situation. So my last point on this is that, as another speaker made the point, Leelanau County is a very, very special place. We have more than 100 miles of Great Lakes coastline. Our dunes are globally unique. Our interdunal wetlands are globally unique, existing nowhere else in the world. And we have a responsibility, an economic responsibility to future generations and to our neighbors to address this problem. I think to third parties, it's actually astonishing that the Great Lakes state, the state that's at the heart of the most magnificent and extraordinary freshwater system in the world, is the only state that doesn't protect the water. So, with that, do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
I would like to reference Mr. Janik did contact the health department and did get an answer to the conversation we had last month, that out of the 16,000 residences with septic systems in our county, we have records on 4,900 of them. So we obviously have an issue, and we obviously have an opportunity. And I'm not proposing that we do anything now. I'm suggesting that we continue our discussion of the opportunity to use the science we have, use the expertise that we have, use all of the resources that we have, and figure out a way to address the issue about septic inspection and clean water. And I thank Skip for being here.
Well, I would have to say that, again, you've got the facts wrong. We have on their records, they have many more than that. They just have not been able to get to them. They've only had the ones that they've actually put in the computer that are 4,900.
That's right.
There are many more, but and that's why they would like to digitize. So again, you're reading the facts in a different way. And to Skip here, I'd like to say most likely is not a scientific statement. When you say scientists are most likely to think that it comes from all the septic systems, that's a guess. And so do we live by guess? And no one has ever said that after 27 years and millions of dollars that Benzie's water is cleaner than Leelanau's water. They all continue to say that we need to check out the septic systems, but they've been doing it for 27 years and there's no proof that their water is cleaner than ours. And so I don't understand how we can continue to say this when we don't have the facts about it.
Chairman Bunnick, may I ask you a question? With respect to Benson County, what do we know about the economic hardship that has resulted from the existence of the ordinance?
Well, we had a man here stating that there were people who did not buy homes because of it, who bought a home and ended up spending $30,000 on a septic system because they were forced to. So they...
No problems that might have been avoided or at least mitigated with earlier notice.
They might have been, but I'm saying that the inspection has created that. It wasn't done through other things. So, I mean, he stated it, not me. I just listened to him.
It has helped.
Yes, Commissioner Redline.
I was interested in the comment that you made that 70% of the water extraction, was that for the state? Is used for
No, that was for the
geothermal?
entire Great Lakes region. Because of our water wealth, we have cited more nuclear plants, natural gas plants, and coal plants in the Great Lakes region so that they can have the benefit of the abundant water to do once through cooling. There is a difference between water usage and consumptive use. The thermoelectric plants use water to cool their plants and then return it to typically to the same body of water. There are consequences associated with that, though. There are thermal impacts. It alters benthic communities. It changes the ecology of the receiving waters. It can also, it's one of the factors in the propagation of algae in western Lake Michigan. One of the largest coal plants in the world is the Monroe plant on western Lake Michigan, or Lake Erie, excuse me.
Any other questions?
Just, I would politely like to take umbrage with your criticism on the use of the words "most likely." I equate them very, very similar to in more probable than not, which we use all the time in the scientific community because you're being careful about making a definite link. There are very few things that we can really definitely say are based on facts, except for death, which we can say, and perhaps paying taxes. But other than that, it's a well-used phrase, more probable than not, and I would link most likely in the same category. So with all due respect, I don't think that's quite a fair criticism.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I stand corrected on my report on the number, but that data then suggests that we have 11,100 septic systems that were installed prior to 1997. Standards have changed. We need to have access to those. We need those old systems inspected. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, please, this is not an audience. All right, then now we bring up the sheriff and the emergency management, the AEDs and devices.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Sheriff Mike Borkovich.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Wesson.
I move to recommend the Leelanau County Board of Commissioners approve the purchase of automatic external defibrillators for the Leelanau County Sheriff's Office courthouse and road patrol vehicles from Zoll in the amount not to exceed $35,700 this year or $21,000 over the next 3 years. Money to come from general fund contingency transferred to fund ending in 010.
Support.
Second.
Any other questions? Commissioner Ansel.
Plan to get this on a repeating schedule. You're confident that we can do that in the future?
Yes. As the attachment to the EDS shows, starting in year 5, we can start slowly accumulating the AEDs and replenish by the time these ones that we purchase grow their life expectancy. And I do have some good news. The rep from the AED salesman, he did not get back with me before the EDS was submitted, so I gave worst case scenario figures for full price. At least for the first year, he will give us the $1,190 price point for the AEDs. So whether we buy 10 or another amount.
So, I mean, that was the hope, that we would buy 10, then 10, and then 10.
Yeah.
And not go through the full 35,000.
Right, and we spread it over multiple budget years.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we can set it up so that that happens. So if that can be done, I would appreciate that. Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes, thank you. The old ones, are they refurbished or just recycled? How does that work?
There were a few that would be eligible for a trade-in value. The other ones would be recycled.
Thank you.
I think there's 5 total that we can get a few dollars back
Okay.
on. May amount to 1 more unit for free.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Good job.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. So then that would bring us to the EMPG grant.
Yes, this is an annual EMPG grant from the state, partially funds my position. And the only change, they added in another form to be signed, kind of a grant risk assessment form. I don't see any issues with moving forward, but it will be a regular quarterly electronic signature that I submit for myself and the chair if the board supports that.
Commissioner Sotomayor.
I recommend to the Board of Commissioners to allow the Chairman of the Board to sign the FY 2019 EMPG work agreement and other documents related to this grant agreement, and to allow the Office Emergency Management to submit electronic signatures for the required quarterly reports.
Second?
Any questions? Go ahead.
Sorry, just one quick question. The new form that you have to sign, has Chet seen it, or?
I did submit it to the clerk. It's more of a
Okay.
grant assessment, you know, it has to do with audits, previous findings and whatnot, so
Okay.
I put it in the hands
Yeah,
of the
we
best
can-
representative.
Right, great, thank you. That'll do it.
Well, in that, I guess that's what I was wondering too, is then, once you do it, you just submit it electronically every quarter?
Every quarter, yes.
Okay. And do you have that written out on a schedule or something? So
Yeah, basically by the state quarterly, so in October I report, in January I report, July.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then that would bring us to the number 4, the Sheriff's Office request for a department credit card. Commissioner Rushton?
Yes, I would move to approve the clerk's office to issue a credit card assigned to the sheriff's office.
I'm hearing no second on this. I would have to say then we would move on to number 5. That's not my second, so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ron had to go downstate for a meeting that was unplanned when the budget came out, but he is asking for his request to purchase the Dell workstation purchases. He'll be here next week, but this is part of the budget process. We do this annually to upgrade our technology, computer services.
All right, so we're just going to move this on.
If you'd like to, yeah.
Commissioner Lautner?
Yes, well, I would recommend we move this on to Tuesday night,
Okay.
unless you would like the full motion right now. Is it going to change? Is the motion going to change before Tuesday night?
I don't think so.
Okay, well then I would request, I'm going to hold off, please. Move this forward, because we have a good question.
My only concern here is waiving the bid requirements. I don't understand exactly why we're doing that. And I would like some information associated with that request.
If you pass it on next week, Ron can be here.
That's why I'm asking for that
Yeah, we
information.
can do that.
Sorry, if I may, because I had the floor, but that was my question too. I'm prepared to move it on, but we can change the motion next week, but I would just assume, I think the answers are that it's all about compatibility, but we're going to want those answers by Tuesday night. I don't know. I don't understand IT, so we'll want those answers.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So the motion then is to just move it forward next week. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Thank you. It's 10:30, we'll just take a 5-minute break.
Michelle Fowler passes on. I think it's,
Okay, the next item
I think
on
it's
our
the-
agenda will be equalization, and Lori isn't here, so I'm sorry, we need to pass this on to next week. If we could?
make a motion. Okay. Make a motion to pass it on to next.
All right.
Support?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes 7-0. All right, that brings us to number 7, which is planning and the RAP grant.
I'll get. Maybe we'll skip on the next one.
Okay, so we'll go on back to the request of letter of support for the eradication of Eurasian milfoil.
Okay, that's from Mr. Polpa from the Road Commission. He's out of town. See if I can talk about that next week also. Oh, there's Trudy.
Oh, all right, well, come on up. We'll go back to the.
Number 7?
Yes.
Hopefully I'll be fast. Okay.
Yes.
This is a request similar to one I submitted a couple months ago where the Planning Commission wants to do a workshop. And some of the costs we can apply to MMRMA under their RAP grant to get some of that reimbursed if they approve it. So that's what this request is for. It's for a master plan workshop. The previous one was for planning and zoning essentials.
I see, do you have the money to cover the other percentages
Yes.
in your budget? So.
And we're also going to charge some. So
Right.
we'll charge $40 a person, which is what we charged last time. So this will kind of help supplement.
What
the
kind of
class.
turnout did you have last time, do you know?
I think it was about 40, 45 people.
really?
Yeah, and we got
Okay.
them from other counties as well, because they were very interested in they were glad to see it come here. Well, thank you.
What page?
Commissioner Rush.
Is there a different fee for those other counties outside of,
No, we didn't charge anything different for them. What we did is we opened it up first to Leelanau County and any Leelanau County citizens, and then we said any other openings, we would open up to other counties.
Commissioner Lott. It's on page 60.
Yes.
I believe.
No. Page, which page is the actual motion on?
Page 60.
There it is, I found it. I would move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners to approve the MMRMA RAP grant to be submitted for a workshop on master plans.
second?
Commissioner Rush.
I just had one more question. Is this specific training targeted to townships?
It's for master plans, so it's townships, villages, cities, and general citizens who are interested in it.
Park
We
and
haven't.
Rec.
Pardon?
Park and Rec.
Yeah, if you're working on plans.
Yeah.
We have a number of communities right now who are either starting the process or thinking about the process, and I've seen from their minutes and some questions coming my way that there's a lot of confusion, and so the timing seemed to be right to get this workshop going.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
So now we'll move on to number 8, of the eradication of Eurasian milfoil.
I believe it's a request from Mr. Popa. I think he talked to you.
Yes.
Chairman Bonnick on it. He is unfortunately out of town. Would like to talk to the board about it next week. So he's simply asking to pass it on to next week's agenda.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Rush.
I was just wondering, is that letter available for us to review?
It should be in our packet. I haven't read it.
It is.
It is?
Yeah.
What page?
68, starting on page 68.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, because I must have overlooked it. Okay.
There was a map, I thought.
Oh,
I did
yes.
see a map of where
I did read
they
this,
found
okay.
it.
I was confused because this is from Victor and not from
Oh, yeah. Well, he came with it to my house and went over it with me, and they're very concerned about it. They said this grows tremendously fast and can cause a lot of problems for the voters, and he wasn't asking for any money. He just wants support from the county, so my only question was, do we a letter of support or do we do a resolution? They're asking for a letter of support, so I guess we just leave it at that, I think. Commissioner Wessel.
I move to recommend that we approve the letter dated September 18, 2019 from William Bunnick, Chairman, in support of the eradication.
Second.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Now we move to senior services and potential extension of service contracts.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have 9 contracts for services, various providers that began January 1st, 2017, and they expire at the end of this year. And so I'm looking for approval to waive the bid process and for Chet and I to negotiate those contracts and bring them forward at the end of the year.
They were bid out last time.
Yep, they were
All
bid
these
out
contracts
last
were bid
time.
out three years ago.
Commissioner Locke.
I would recommend to the Board of Commissioners to allow the Leelanau County Senior Services to waive the bid policy and work with Leelanau County Administrator to review and negotiate Leelanau County Senior Services service contracts to begin January 1, 2020.
Second.
Commissioner Ansel.
Do you want to speak to it?
I was just wondering if the providers are going to be negotiated should be included in the motion.
We would have to come back with you with final recommendations.
Okay. Well, for the service contract.
Yeah, this is
so
just asking
I will just
permission.
add then the service contracts as presented to begin January 1. And they're listed.
The list as presented.
Yes.
Yes. You're not going to have new contracts with anyone else other than the list.
Okay.
And those will come back to your board for approval,
Right.
assuming we have agreement with the providers.
Correct.
She made an amendment to them. Is that okay with the second?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Ansel.
Why are we not going out for bids? I'm just,
Sure. So these service providers, like let's say Munson Comfort Keepers, they're the home health agencies that have been providing in-home services. So the personal care, respite, and management services. It is it's really hard. So if we went out for a bid and somebody came in lower, the question we are continuing to see is that there really are no other home health agencies that can provide, that have the ability to actually provide the service. There's challenges in Leelanau County in getting home health providers to do the service. There's a shortage of healthcare workers, and so most other companies are smaller companies and don't have the staff in order to provide the service for the rural area of Leelanau County.
Well, I can
And then
address it too.
also,
The other company that did bid last time is no longer in business. The other companies cannot meet our insurance requirements.
Right. And then also, it's really hard if you have a senior that has been receiving service from one company. We experienced this when we had a different service provider and we had to switch. That is really hard on that senior to go from having someone for a long period of time and then now we're switching to another organization, another company. So for continuity of care, the service providers we have been doing a very good job. I meet with them on a quarterly basis to address any concerns. It's going to be about the same, the pricing regardless is going to be the same for any home health agency.
Go ahead. Still have the floor.
my concern here is there are constantly companies being opened up and starting, services in this area. And, at some point, there's a benefit of going out and seeing if somebody can do it cheaper. And I understand there's a drawback for people that, may have be used to one particular person, but we're also supposed to be good with our money. And if we don't ask, I don't know, I'm saying we have to do it every year, but we should be doing it on a regular basis just to make sure that other people that may have the opportunity and may be able to do it cheaper have the opportunity to come tell us they can do it.
I don't disagree.
That's the whole purpose of bids.
Commissioner Locke.
But we did just bid them out, was it last year?
Well, it was, when these contracts were signed was 3 years ago.
Oh, okay, so that's a good point. So
But there were 3-year contracts.
Yeah, so after a point, I think that's a very good point. Do we know of any other providers out there that may have started businesses that could provide the service? Have they approached you looking for?
There are always people that approach me and ask, and then when I ask, can you provide service to Northport Empire, then they say, that's really hard. I don't have the staffing to be able to do that. So I have 2 companies that can provide, that they have staffing that will go to those very rural areas. So I'm hesitant about taking on somebody because it's a lower cost, and then they don't have staffing to do that.
Well, then many of these, the Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency is the federal agency that gives the Meals on Wheels funds. So you can't really bid that out to anyone else because they're the ones that administer in our area,
Right.
which it looks like more than half of these are services that have to be obtained from.
Any other questions or statements? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes 6-1.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so then that brings us to the Board of Canvassers from the County Clerk. And we should all have a ballot here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So this is that time of year, every other year, to appoint 2 members to the Board of Canvassers. The law kind of conflicts itself that you're required to vote by ballot, but it's also a violation of the Open Meetings Act to keep your vote secret. And so, well, let me just first tell you, the Democratic Party has nominated John Harbottle, Dennis Boucher, and Fred Sapella. The Republicans have nominated Stephen Yoder, Karen Josephus, and Eric Lind. The current members are John Harbottle and Eric Lind. They both would like reappointment. They do a very good job. And so that's my pitch for those 2 individuals. They have served on for a while, but there is no limitation like your other boards to do this. In fact, I think it's John Harbottle's first term. So because it is individual and then accumulative, we can do it a couple different ways, whatever your pleasure is. I made everyone up a sheet with your name highlighted, or if you prefer, I can just call on you and write your vote down. Either way, it's going to be public who you select.
Yes, Commissioner Rush.
Out of the 6 candidates, who have served historically besides, I know Eric has and Harbottle has, have these other candidates served?
I use Karen Josephus. I've used her as a sub.
Okay.
And Sapella, I've used as a sub, and have I used you as a sub? I've used Dennis as a sub, so whoever doesn't, I use them as subs for fill-ins.
Okay, and how long have Harbottle and Lind served?
Harbottle this is just his first term because I appointed him. When there's a vacancy midterm, I do the appointments. And he replaced David Marshall, Mr. Marshall, who passed away.
So he's served?
He's hardly served one full
Okay.
term. And Eric, I don't recall how many terms you've been on now. A couple?
Well-versed?
He's well-versed, yes, and they all go to training. And so, are you our current chair or vice chair? Neither?
I'm neither.
We rotate. We have a rotation. Republican chair, Democratic vice chair rotate, and then we rotate 2 between the males and the females.
Thank you for the information.
Harbottle's the chair.
Harbottle's the chair now, so Susie Quinlan is probably our vice chair.
Any other questions?
I'm good with her just calling us. I mean,
Well,
Commissioner Rett?
what I was going to say is, why don't we do a roll call vote verbally, and then mark our ballots in the way that we vote, and then give them to you? I mean, do you want
You
to
can-
reaffirmation and writing,
You
or?
can do, I can, do you want me to ask you and you tell me? Or you want to mark your ballot down and then I tell everyone?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It can't be confidential, so I just didn't know which way you prefer. Sometimes you like the ballot, so you don't have to say it out loud, and then I just say, are you okay with me just calling your names and you telling me who you want? And I put
I'm
everyone.
okay with that.
I put it in Commissioner District order, so there's no preference here. So Commissioner Ansorgi,
I vote for the recommended candidates, Harbottle and Lind.
okay. Commissioner Rushton,
Harbottle, Lind.
Chairman Bonick,
Harbottle, Lynn.
Commissioner Wessel,
Harbottle, Lynn.
Sotis Little,
Harbottle, Lind.
Rettenbach.
Harbottle, Lind.
Could you
Commissioner
tell
Lautner.
us up?
I can tell you what's up. Commissioner Lautner?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Am I the tiebreaker at this point? The campaigning was intense, but I will go Harbottle and Lind.
Okay, so that was 7 for Harbottle and 7 for Lynn, so if we could just have a motion. then-
Commissioner Lautner.
So I recommend to the Board of Commissioners that John Harbottle be reappointed and Eric Lind be reappointed to the Leelanau County Board of Canvassers, each for a 4-year term, November 1, 2019 through October 31, 2023.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes
That was
7-0.
easy.
Thank you very
Do you
much.
need these? No, you can keep those, and I've got it for the public.
You're next on the transfer.
I'm next.
On the,
I'm not
we-
gonna have
You want to transfer the money?
the LEC.
Oh,
project.
I'll have to go get that paperwork. Can you come?
For that, could you, lunch menus here?
There's one here.
Lunch menus? Everyone wants lunch?
Can you come back to me in just a second?
Yeah,
I can't eat
we'll
it.
do indigenous peoples first.
Yes, yeah. I just.
Everyone turn in their lunch?
Yeah, I did. I've done it.
That-
Okay, so we're going to go to B, 11B, Indigenous Peoples' Day. Commissioner Wessel, you put this on the agenda. Did you want to speak to this first?
I will speak to it, and I commend our chair for redrafting the Indigenous Peoples' Day resolution, and I support the resolution as written. And I would also say that Will and I did talk last week, and I also took it upon myself to share it with a couple of tribal members, and they thanked the county commission and thanked Will for his efforts.
Did anybody else want to speak about it? I mean, I really felt that if the county has written this and looked through it and try to make it a positive thing as opposed to something that was more negative, which is what my feeling about the other one was, that in this way we're moving forward towards, working with, the tribe and I was hoping we could all vote for this and move it forward to show our support for the tribe.
I move to recommend the resolution to recognize the first day of October as Indigenous Peoples' Day, Leelanau County Resolution 2019 XXX.
Second.
Any other comments?
This will be a resolution on Tuesday's
Yes.
meeting.
So we'll just have a regular vote, and we'll have to have a roll call. And I guess what I'm hoping is whenever we pass a resolution that's going to be published, that the names of the people who voted for it or against it are published with it, so that so that it just shows what we're deciding, what the commissioners are doing, and that's why I knew it was going to be published this year, and I prefer to have everyone in favor. So now I'll ask for the vote. If there's any other questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much.
October 1st is the day of our executive committee meeting next month, so I'll invite the tribal chairman or representative to come to the meeting.
That would be nice.
We'll officially present it.
Very nice.
Commissioner Redmond.
In the resolution that we got in our packet, this is the,
That's the original
Okay.
that was passed.
okay,
What you have passed out is the new one,
okay,
the revised one.
And the red shows the changes
Okay.
that were made. And with the
Make
help
sure.
of Commissioner Wessel as well, and the members of the tribe.
We can go back to the first one, I can, this. As you know, last month, or last week, we found out that the roof was not built according to the specs, and some areas had to come back and put extra flashing in. You saw the pictures that Dwayne showed, actually had some holes in them. So that was not part of the bid process, it was not part of Luck's bid, so there was additional costs that we had to do, obviously. And so I think, Michelle, you're just asking for transfer of the funds.
Actually, we're looking for a motion to exceed the scope of the project and increase the total amount that we're going to expend. And the first issue, as it relates to the exterior insulation and finish system, which needs to be attended to, will be an additional $2,635. And the second issue relates to the short length of a split-face masonry wall, and that amount is $2,480. So we just want the scope of the project to be increased to allow for these two expenditures, as I just stated. At this point, we're not going to ask for additional funding to be transferred to the Capital Projects Building Fund, which is where this expenditure would come from. I think at this point, we're okay money-wise with that fund. If we find out later, we would come and ask for a transfer, probably either from contingency or DTR, but I think contingency. It's not a lot of money. We're talking under $6,000.
so,
Commissioner Answer,
I have nothing on this.
All I have is this, and I'm happy to make you a
So,
copy of it.
I'm just going to suggest that we move this forward to next Tuesday.
Sure.
By what time, hopefully, we'll have that information.
Is that your motion?
I move, so move.
Okay.
Support.
And I'll draft up the motions for you for next week, and I'll give you copies of what we were given with the pictures attached.
And that was passed out last week.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
it
already
was?
have the pictures,
The
yeah.
commission, oh, you do have this, okay.
We just need the motions.
Yeah, I'll type up the motions for you.
Any
yeah,
Commissioner
my
Redmond?
question was just about the two amounts. It was $2,635 for flashing?
It says, which needs to be cut approximately 8 inches higher, a new metal coping and properly terminated and flashed for the length of the,
Right.
which is approximately 110 linear feet. And the second one relates to a short length, approximately 6 feet 4 inches of a split-face masonry wall where the masonry weep holes are 6 inches above the roof membrane, which should have been placed 12 inches higher per the record drawings, the drawings on record. The wall will have to be furred out with hat channel and covered with corrugated metal to allow for proper termination and flashing.
Okay, and that was $2,480?
Correct.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Right, these were things that were on the specs.
remember.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Michelle.
Welcome.
All right, then let's bring this to Iron Man.
Commissioner Answer, we have.
Yes.
I was the person that requested this be put on the agenda. Obviously, my district is the one closest to Traverse City, and I have most people that use that as a bedroom community. And I probably had the most complaints about the Ironman situation and traffic situation, and people not being able to get to work, church, grocery stores, all that kind of stuff. So I did a little bit of investigation about how this all came about and discovered that the Michigan Department of Transportation, MDOT, I'm just going to use MDOT from now on, And the Michigan State Police did issue a traffic control order, and a permit was issued by MDOT, but that was only to reduce the speed limit. That's the only thing that they can do underneath the traffic control ordinance other than parking. There was nothing in that order or the permit for closing any roads. And so I did some additional information and research, and there is a state law that has the procedure that must be followed in order to close a road. And that procedure was not followed. So in essence, the closing of the roads for the Ironman competition was unlawful. And I have prepared a resolution that I would like to distribute as a draft so that you guys can all be educated on all the things behind this thing. But I am basically proposing a resolution for the State Attorney General to investigate why the state law was not followed. And also possibly some clarifications on how that should be implemented in the future. I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody, but I don't want this to happen again. And the procedure to close a road is very clear under the state law that the local municipalities, which would be a city, a village, incorporated village, or a township, can petition by resolution to have a road closed. And that did not happen anywhere. The Michigan Department of Transportation, or in the case of state trunk lines, or our local road commission, then does their due diligence and can approve a permit for road closures, and that did not happen. So I just want this done. If it happens again in the future, I want it done according to the law. Now, the county is not a municipality that can submit a request for a road closure. It would have to be a city, village, or township, and my interpretation is that it has to be in the request of a road closure in their jurisdiction. In other words, I can't request a road closure to close a road in Detroit. I don't, it's not in my jurisdiction. So I'm a little frustrated with how this all came about with a lot of other people, because I was one of those people that was inconvenienced by the road closures. The traffic plan that was issued by the Ironman organization had specific times, dates, and for different roads to be closed. That was not followed. Roads were closed well before the time they were advertised they were going to be closed. I don't know who closed the roads. I don't know who provided the barricades, who erected the barricades. I don't know any of that, all that kind of stuff. But that would be something that whoever investigates this, and I don't think it's appropriate to have our county prosecuting attorney do this, because he has to work with these people. And that's why I'm suggesting that we look to the state attorney general and ask for the investigation through them. So I have some information that I would like to provide to the commissioners in preparation for next Tuesday's meeting, but I'm asking to move this forward to next Tuesday's meeting, and that we be prepared to look at this issue. And obviously, we will also have opportunity for our corporate counsel to weigh in, because I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if I'm wording this properly and all that kind of stuff. But things were not done the way they should have been done. And I'm not going to voice an opinion one way or the other about the pros and cons of an Ironman race, but I do think they should have to follow the law when we do these things. And I don't want this to happen again in the future.
Commissioner Rush.
I would like to ask Commissioner Ansori if he has reached out to any of the townships that were also directly affected by the road closures and have asked for any sort of support.
Go ahead.
I have not. And the reason why is none of the townships passed any kind of resolution associated with the road closures, which is what they should have had the opportunity to do if they wanted to close the road.
I'm just wondering about the awareness of the issue.
I'm sure they are no more aware of the issue than I was before I started digging into it.
Commissioner Red.
I'll second the motion and also ask the question of after the city, village, or township makes the request, they turn that to the road commission?
It's turned over to the authorized road authority, which in the case of state trunk lines is MDOT.
Okay.
But a county road, like was closed in Empire Township, would be turned over to the county road commission.
Okay.
And the county road commission then has to do their due diligence. They may come up with a traffic control plan, how are we going to do this? And that could be included in any permit that they elect to issue. But, that's the process that they're supposed to have followed, and it was not followed. That's my main beef here is we didn't follow, whoever closed the roads did not follow the process.
At the request of Commissioner Ansori, I made numerous phone calls in the last several days about this. I talked to the chairman of the road commission. I talked to the director of the road commission. I talked to the director of Traverse City Tourism. I talked to Empire Township clerk and supervisor, and I talked to the city of Traverse City clerk. All of them verified that there were no action taken by them on road closures. In fact, when I called the clerk's office and the Traverse Tourism Bureau, they said I was the first one that's ever asked for any documentation. They had a series of meetings, which I think these people were part of. It was all agreed upon verbally. There was no documentation, there was no request. The road commission took no action, it was not on their agenda. The only passage was the Township Empire passed a special permit use. They did not pass anything in terms of a road closure. So just an update. The city clerk called me back last night. He talked to the original rep of the Department of Transportation, and this is their standard procedure, and they follow the procedure as they had done for these type of events before. But he did confirm there was no written documentation, nor was there any passage of any local units of government to support this, nor did the Department of Transportation or the state police issue any written documentation, other than what's in your packet.
Did you say last one?
Red button.
The Empire passed a special use permit. It didn't state what the special use was for? Or?
I didn't say it. They have a special events permit that people want to use township probably property and accessories, and they passed that. It's a generic one that they use for everyone requesting a special use in the township.
Okay.
It did not relate to the road closure.
Commissioner Lott.
Yes, thank you. I certainly support this. I will support this resolution because I think it's important for future.
I couldn't quite hear you.
Sorry.
Could you please repeat?
Loud enough?
Siri is always listening.
Yes, I didn't even know she had the voice. I just want to speak quickly to, I think there were a lot of problems. And I hope that, it was a great event. For those who were involved or love it or wanted to do it, it was a great event for those people. For those who were inconvenienced, they were really inconvenienced. And I found it sad that a lot of people who spoke their frustration were like immediately attacked and told, well, if you don't like it, move, you know, and you were told for months to plan ahead, so you shouldn't have had your family reunion this weekend, and things like that. But I went to one of the meetings in early May to hear about this, because I was concerned. I have a business along the route, and I was concerned about that, and we were told, oh, no traffic will be able to flow, you'll just have to go between the bikes, but you'll be able to cross, et cetera, et cetera. That certainly was not the case. And as Mr. Ansorgi began to receive phone calls that morning, I began to receive phone calls that morning, wondering whether the county had authorized us to effectively be cut off out here on the peninsula. And they ranged from businesses. I spoke with a couple of businesses along that route, and they were down to a third of the usual revenue that they have that Sunday. And I said, well, had you picked it up earlier in the week or after? And they said no. That revenue will never be recovered for them. I know a lot of churches, they depend on those collection plates, and those collection plates were way down, and they will more than likely never regain that revenue they're needed. But there are people who have lives. I had a nurse calling me in tears, and she said she came off her shift at Munson and just wanted to get home to go to bed. I don't know if it was a 24-hour shift, 12-hour, I don't know. But she said, I couldn't get to my bed. After she waited for an hour in traffic, she finally turned around and went back, I guess, to get some sleep at work or a friend's house. But, I mean, these are lives that were definitely impacted. I understand I had a rescue squad that was not allowed to cross. They had to go down, take another road. It added 10 minutes to their rescue. So I know that farmers were impacted. Yes, the cherry season was done, but we had others trying to farm, and I know they had to resort to going down and crossing a field to another field when nobody was looking, and that's their livelihood. So I say this because I think we have to recognize the fact that it did not go as smoothly as anticipated. So if this event does come, it needs to be rerouted so that Leelanau County is not left out here cut off for those who want to come in and those who need to get out either way, or need to come in. Those are my comments.
You allowed to make a comment? Sure. I went on record at the first meeting of the Ironman that as sheriff, I did not think it was a good idea to plug up our roads during the busy summer tourist season, and a multitude of reasons beyond that. One, and primary one, being Traverse City Tourism Convention Bureau wanted this event, and how crafty that they had the swimming down there in the bay and they ran on the boardwalk, but when it came time to shuffle the bikes out, they ended up in Leelanau County. And I'm not against the event. I'm an athlete. I believe in athleticism. I think that every competitor I saw in that event was well behaved, but it was suggested at the meeting by me that they would run up the Mission Point Peninsula. And the township supervisor behind me said, no way. I said, well, why don't you go around, bicycle around Long Lake? No way. Why don't you go out Supply Road out to 131 and come back? No way. Why don't you go out to Broomhead Road, state land? We don't want to go on the gravel. Why don't you go out the bicycle trail that goes by the Baby Restaurant up toward, Acme? No way. And I think that, from context of who pays for the roads, bicyclists pay nothing for the roads. And this was sold off as, we're going to do this. And I know, Chet, they talked to you and said that, we all agreed to that meeting. I never agreed to that. I don't have the authority to agree with it, number one, because that's an individual township decision or an individual entity, as you said. But number two, from a common sense standpoint, I feel like I have to represent the people of Leelanau County who live here, work here, play here. My understanding is there was 2 churches that did not have services that day. And there were a lot of people who were frustrated beyond just normal, have to go to the bathroom. You forget about those little things in line. So I just say that I think they're going to come at us again with maybe alternative route plans, maybe even M22. I have no idea what they're looking at, but the way I look at it, it started with Traverse City Tourism Convention Bureau. To me, they should host it down there.
My question about this is, I mean, since the county is not, has any authority over it, if we go through this resolution, do we have standing? And we requested of the, Attorney General, I mean, now, I know lots of times people are thrown out because they don't have a standing in the lawsuit, which Leelanau County does not. So I do think we need to get support from townships or other things. Go ahead.
Anybody can file a complaint for a violation of the law. Anybody can. I think why I think we should be involved is we were neutral on this. We were never asked, and we have no authority to say yea or nay. And I think by us weighing in and asking the state attorney general to investigate, I think that puts it at an arm's length from anybody in any county, county up here, Grand Traverse County, city. It puts it at arm's length. Let a neutral, impartial person that actually has the authority to investigate. And I think the state attorney general is the right person to do that, but that's just my opinion.
I agree with you completely on that, but I'm just saying a request from a person that's not standing in the lawsuit lots of times doesn't get allowed, but it doesn't mean we can't request it.
This is not a lawsuit.
I know, but I'm using that as a theory.
I guess we could have our corporate attorney look at this and say, is this appropriate? Is this something we can do or can't do? That's absolutely legitimate question.
Right, and I guess that's what I'm saying. We should have them look at it before we do this kind of a resolution. And also, I would hope that we could get support from the townships so that they would do resolutions as well, because they really were the ones who have the authority to do something with it. But so I think it's a great idea that we do it, because it really did hurt our county overall, but we should get someone who was, who has the authority to talk about it, to be joined in. That's my hope.
I was just looking at it from a viewpoint of the people that were affected by this, who we represent them.
Exactly. Were there any other comments or anything?
So, my motion is to move forward to next Tuesday.
Okay. Do we have a second on that? Yes, I thought so. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. All right, so then that brings us to early childhood report.
Yeah, last month there was a request from Commissioner Russian for additional information on the early childhood millage request, and I did my best to fulfill that. Much of the questions asked, the responses I received from people is that information will be available if the millage passes. Just a brief summary here. Much of the detailed information, I'm being told, would not be developed until after the vote if it is successful. So what I did is put together the best I could in terms of information that was available that may answer partially some of those questions, not all those questions, but at least gives you a start in that. But that's the information that I was able to achieve. This is not, as I understand it, if it passes, this will be a health department initiative mostly that we would contract with. So it would not be in this office or in this building. So a lot of questions about terms of space and employees. Those would not be county employees. So like I said, I attempted my best to answer those questions, but much of the information is not available yet.
I appreciate you making that effort, and as you are all aware, it's basically a rehash of a little information that was provided during the presentation. So the taxpayers continually do not have pertinent information to make a decision on the issue. But thank you for your efforts.
So if we pass it, we can read it.
Any other statements on it? Seeing none, then we'll move on to the Grand Traverse Band, 2% allocation. And I think Commissioner Wessel, did you?
I did not ask.
Commissioner Ansberg asked
Oh, okay.
at the last meeting to put
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
discussion.
All right. Go ahead.
Every time we have a discussion about this, we seem to have an issue about whether we should be doing this or not doing this. And from my perspective, the only way this would be resolved is if we were to go back to the federal court and ask for them to open this up and look at what is happening and is this the way it should be done? If we're gonna, continue to process 2% grants, either, and we have disagreement amongst ourselves about what whether this should be done or shouldn't be being done, the only way you can resolve it is to go back to court. So if we're going to do that, I would like to have somebody think about that and make that motion and we can have that debate. But otherwise, I don't want to hear it every month that, we shouldn't be doing this, we shouldn't be doing this. Either, let's do it, address it once and be done with it and not have that same conversation every time there's a 2% request. That's where I'm coming from on this issue.
Commissioner Lund.
Well, I think it may be helpful if we had maybe a timeline of where we are with this, because I'm trying to remember some details, and I know we've got an expert in-house, relative expert on this whole issue, but we have 2%, we're entitled locally here to 2% of the gaming revenues in lieu of taxes. So that being said, the way they have handed out the 2% has changed over the years. The county used to receive it in a check. They used to use your 2%. And the county board of commissioners decided how that would be spent. Then it evolved into, well, we want to know and have a say in on what we're going to be giving you that money for. So, and it's evolved. So this board of commissioners went from having, the total control to now, what are we going to ask for? So we've done it a number of different ways. We had a formula at one time which took in radius to the tribe, or to the casino, and then impact, and it was determined that you scored. It was a scoring system. So all requests were scored, and those were, placed as our number 1, 2, 3 through 10 ask, so to say. And then there were some commissioners who didn't like that process and said we should just be throwing everything at the wall and see what sticks. So that began to happen, and then we got into expenditures that were outside of what we are required to do here as commissioners, and then along came the contracts for services, which exceeded our scope of authority. So your question is a good one. What do we want to do? But when I asked for the timeline, the compact expired some years ago, and
2013.
it just hasn't been renewed. But it was my understanding that the tribe has no interest in going and writing a new compact. I'm not sure if I misunderstood that or if that's fact. I don't know, but I think the tribe has to want to come to the table to rewrite that. And I think it should be. I think we should, rather than just act on the old compact, and it's jelly for us right now. So, in not a good way.
Well, are you through on that?
Yeah, I would like, do we know that, does the tribe have any interest in going to the table to renegotiate the compact?
I think that's would be something that we could really work with. I mean, clearly, in the agreement, they are violating it by how they're giving out the 2%, and also we are violating it on how we ask for it, but Grand Traverse does the same thing. So my thinking is that we should get together with Grand Traverse County and demand that the state renegotiate this so that it's more clear. Because, as we look at these 2% fundings, it's supposed to go to government services, government issues, and we're giving it now to as I talk about it, to 501c3s. So I think that can't be solved unless we agree not to do that. So, but as long as they accept them and they violate their own contract, and we do it for money, that's what really bothers me, is we're doing it just for money. And so we will violate our own rules just so we can get more money. And that's where I really have a problem with it. So I don't know how we can ever agree. When we agree to violate our own rules and violate, donating to 501c3s, I could never agree to that. It's just wrong for government to do it, take from one and give to another, and not service it. But I would suggest that we get together with Grand Traverse County Commissioners and demand that the state renegotiate it. I mean, according to what I've been told, is that there's windows, like every 5 years, that we can ask and request that it get renegotiated. So I'm saying, if we want to get this solved, then let's get it renegotiated so that they're not, because I think the money really supposed to only go to Leelanau and Grand Traverse, where the casinos are, not to Antrim, not to Benzie, not to Kalkaska, not to all of those. They're reinterpreting it to go to all these places, and because they have tribal members there, and that's been their criteria is how can they get this money 2% back to tribal members, not to government services, and we're yes, exactly. So I'm sorry.
No, I just give an update, and Mr. Carlson's expert can help me if I misspeak. This has been brought up numerous times. About 4 years ago, this was brought up. I contacted numerous state offices. It was interesting because I got transferred. I started off the governor's office, went to the Attorney General's office, went to the Department of Treasury, trying to get information. They all shifted me around. It's a unique agreement with this tribe that's different than the rest of the tribes. You're right, the tribe that's in Manistee, for example, they have a board, a government board comprised of those units of government that allocate the funds. That's not the way this compact was written. There also is a clause in the compact that says it continues beyond the expiration date. If there's no new agreement, the current terms continue. Between the Attorney General's office, the Governor's office, and the Treasury Department, I had no support from anyone wanting to renegotiate this. The only written document I could get was one that was sent actually to the township of Suds Bay, saying the money has to stay within their jurisdiction. It cannot be given, for example, Suds Bay Township cannot allocate funds for a project if it's Sullivan Township and vice versa. And if it's a school district, it has to be from K-12. Outside of that, the state of Michigan has been silent on this. The tribal's legal opinion is the compact terms are in place, they're following their procedures, and their chairman's been very open at those receptions that some of us have been at, Mr. Carlson has been at, that his priority is nonprofits and first responders. And they're going to continue to do it the way they have been doing it. And so he kind of addresses that every time he gives the checks out, that it's their choice, it's their money. They have a process in place that both federal and state governments agreed to in 1993, was it, Mr. Cole? 1993, and they are following the terms of those compacts. And so there was some movement a couple years ago to renegotiate. I asked the state who from the state was representing the state of Michigan. No one could tell me. And no one could tell me if there was future dialogue. Is there a public forum we could address this to? Is there someone we could contact in the state? I got no responses from anybody.
Commissioner Wilson.
Just a couple of, one question, a couple of comments. First, I don't ever remember it being like Melinda talked about, where we got a check.
No, that was a different area. A lot of tribes do it this way.
Oh, no, it was
This
here.
tribe never did that.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. We did two things I can remember right off the bat. And one was an ambulance for Sutton's Bay, requested to the county that we purchase an ambulance rescue squad for Sutton's Bay Fire, which we did. And I know we did $100,000 for the Bugай Road extension when that went through. Those are the two big things I can remember that this
Well, we'll
county
check
did
into that.
with 2% money.
That was a handy check.
But my
We did
comments,
one
we...
big check. That's what we got. That's what.
Thanks. We just approved a contract for Share Care, providing services for our seniors. And in that contract, we approved contracts with some nonprofits. I don't want to suggest that we're donating to nonprofits. When we use 2% allocations, we're providing services to our residents via the nonprofit agency. And that certainly is what we do with other funds, as I just shared with Share Care. I'm not opposed to renegotiating and talking to the tribe, but until we do that, I think we're foolish not to go ahead and try to get our share of money for our residents, however we need to do it. And if the tribal chair says that their priority is nonprofits and emergency services, let's stop debating the nonprofit issue until we can renegotiate that. And let's make sure we provide for our families and our residents through whichever contracts with nonprofits we think are appropriate. We can have contracts with them, we can hold them accountable. If we don't do that, shame on us, that's our fault. But let's not fight their priority, and let's go ahead and do what we need to do to provide additional services to our families. Thank you. Commissioner Rushton.
I would suggest for this board, since we have such such diverse positions on this 2% money, that we come to an agreement to support all aspects of our first responders and limit the 2% requests in that regard. In every township, we have fire department, we have first responders, and we have sheriff's department that provides first responder services. And I think we could all agree to support those entities because God knows they are the ones that provide a great service to all of our citizens at different times, whether it be fire, heart attack, car accident, any number of things. So I would not have a problem with supporting all of our first responder and the associated departments in the request for 2% money. It's an area where I believe we all could agree on.
Well, this is something we've talked about a lot, I know, and I know we all have varying interpretations of the compact and exactly what it does and does not mean based on different articles we've read and people we've spoken with. The townships also submit, and the schools and the villages have the ability to submit 2% funds, and they do. And I think your idea of the first responder is supporting those initiatives is good, but I would also note that they tend to go through the townships and the villages because they have that opportunity to do that. I agree with Commissioner Wessel. I think we are missing a huge opportunity to support our community by saying that we are not going to look at nonprofit corporations. And again, as he pointed out, we do in many other ways, and I think it's important. I think what we need to look at is what is the request and what is the impact on our community as a whole if we choose to support a particular request that comes before us for a 2%. But I think we're missing the boat if we take a hard and fast line on this, and I'm hopeful that we don't do that.
Commissioner Law.
Yes, thank you. I was going to suggest something along the line. I'm happy to hear that they do recognize the emergency services portion, and if that is one of their criteria, I agree with Deborah that we go that way, because the idea was that the 2% dollars offset impacts made by the tribe. So that being said, I think there's absolutely no doubt that supporting our first responders with all kinds of requests for the 2% dollars would certainly cover that aspect of it. But just to go out for nonprofits or 501c3s just because they ask, and well, because we might get it, I think that then we personally violate that part of the compact, because like the Cancer Society, there's no litmus test. So we can't say, well, we're helping our most vulnerable in the community because there's no litmus test. So you're just going to throw, give money to anybody if they ask who's had cancer. That isn't an impact from the casino being in our county. So there is a difference there, and I do think I've asked repeatedly over the years, we do draw a line. And I would prefer to get back to that framework of some kind, but at least stick with emergency services. And if we can all agree on sending through emergency services, I'm all for that. First responders and emergency services.
One interesting factor in why they say they're in compliance is, and I didn't realize this till I looked at it a couple years ago, the amount of money that the tribe gives us for the jail, those guaranteed beds, they get to count that as 2% allocation to Leelanau County. That's something the board agreed to when the contract was signed. So that amount that we get every year, I forgot the amount, it's pretty substantial, I think $60,000, $70,000. That technically is part of the 2%, because by the compact, they have to give us an equal amount of money. And I did the math, it didn't add up until you add the jail thing. If you put the jail in it, then it does add up. So they are meeting the legal obligation of the contract. And the county board at some point agreed that that would be part of the 2% allocation. So those checks we get for the jail, for the guarantee of those beds, that is all part of the 2% funding.
What's absolute impact from, it's absolute impact that, it's your impact versus county, tribe impact, and it's a given.
If we ever were to negotiate it, that I think would be a topic of discussion, whether that should be 2% funding or not.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that's why I was concerned about that with the dog catcher thing, so that they weren't considering that 2% funding as well, because there is an obligation of them to give a certain percentage of it to Leelanau County. And we help them out when we ask for money for nonprofits, where it doesn't go to the county, it goes to the people in the county. And those in that nonprofit are the ones that hopefully benefit from it. So when we go for the money, I feel like we're selling our souls just for the money, so that we keep it here in the county. And I think to me that's not the way that a county should be run. Commissioner Answer.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but looking back, the tribe is saying they're meeting their minimum contributions to Leelanau County. Is that all they're doing?
It has varied. It has varied for years, off and on. But because of the contract with the jail, they will always meet the requirement to the county government here.
Commissioner Woods.
Well, I heard Deb's suggestion, and I certainly would support making sure that we apply for emergency services needs every time. we struggle a lot, how are we going to pay for those? I also would agree that we don't throw money at nonprofits just because we want to throw money at a nonprofit. But let's agree, emergency services and residents in need that might be served by nonprofits. But let's not approve them unless this body thinks that that nonprofit can deliver on the goods. And that's the test for us, I think. I don't want to give to a nonprofit just so we get our fair share. I want to give to those nonprofits that can do a better job of serving our residents in need than we can do. And so I think we're close. Emergency services and resident emergency needs that are done in a responsible, contracted way. And that's what I'd support.
Commissioner Rushton.
If I can speak to a specific issue, in regards to one of the most recent requests for the Cancer Foundation, and I forget the name. I specifically asked if there was any eligibility requirements, and there was none. So when we talk about needy, we certainly did not determine if the people that would be receiving those funds were in a needy position, because there was no criteria as far as income, assets, and so forth. If we have such a desire to serve needs, then why don't we work through our senior services and encourage our director of senior services to apply for more funding for specific needs that we know we would be able to have a certain level of oversight. So.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, I do think this board has tried to do that by saying that it's in our policies, it needs to go through the departments. But the board has circumvented that by calling themselves a department and asking for these things through the board instead of through a different department. So we ourselves are circumventing our own policy. That's my opinion on it. I also, just think that I wonder if we would be in favor of, like Leland's child development, early child development, if we would have that as a thing we would request for. Would that be because, the kids need to have support there? Or Northport, which closed down, would we go for that? Or St. Mary's preschool, because, those kids need help, and some of them, are on food, get help from there. I mean, if it's brought here before the board, what criteria do we have that we put on any of these 501c3s that, that we ask of them? Or, so I mean, I can see an unlimited supply of 501c3s that can be brought to us for 2% funding. And I don't know how you would say that they don't need it. Because all the ones I've thought of, even the Leelanau Lake Association on milfoil comes forward, and they're a 501c3. Would we support that? Because that's going to pollute our lakes, and so when it comes to that, there's no limit, and that's why I say we're starting down a road that I don't see that we don't belong on to start with, and then we're continuing, and pretty soon you just lose the focus of what government's for. Commissioner Soisler.
I hear what you're saying, but already we're not consistent. I mean, some of the things we do because we're doing good. Okay, I'll use that phrase. Right. The honor flight. There is no determination of socioeconomic status to be to be privileged to go on the honor flight. We do it because we honor our veterans, which is a good thing to do. And yet we don't apply any criteria on that whatsoever. So we're really inconsistent to say we have to have really strong criteria over here when we don't in other projects, you know, that really we support, and it's a good thing we do. It's a good thing to do. So I'm really having trouble getting my mind around some of the comments and how they would come together. You know, I think supporting emergency responders is terrific. We should do that. Supporting other needs that benefit the community, not just because it's a 501c3, but as Commissioner Wessel just said, that does something that's beneficial, that helps our community. Why wouldn't we look at that? So that's the trouble I'm having.
Commissioner Rush.
I would like to correct Commissioner Sotis Little's statement. There is a criteria to participate in the honor flight. The criteria these gentlemen have met by putting their lives on the line for the service of this country and for the freedom of this country. No other citizen in our community has put forth as much sacrifice as these men and women have done. So, yes, there is a criteria. They have to be a veteran of our foreign wars.
Commissioner Rett.
You know, going back to the foundation of the county and all the history, the first act was to give some money to the war widows. So that falls into the, not necessarily the first responders, but you know, it supports what Deb just brought up about the veterans and the honor flight. We are a department. Well, you know, this board is a department, considered a department. So, I mean, I think that we do have the authority to sponsor these things. And certainly, there are many different forms that we already have contracts, as was stated before, with nonprofits that we provide services that benefit all. This morning, I think, and I can't remember exactly the way this goes, but as the tide rises, all boats rise, or whatever that is. So, I mean, I think to enrich the county in as many ways as we can for all of our citizens, that we should continue to support as many nonprofit requests as we feel we can, along with all the emergency services, and any way that we can benefit our citizens. We can't force the tribe to give their money in any other way. I mean, there's no way that we can tell them what to do with this money. And the way that things are going now, I just see that it would be a benefit for us to continue to approve all the requests and help those who need it.
Mr. Lawson.
My comment was just that as far as our veterans go, if our veterans aren't our first responders, I don't know who is. And it might have been that they responded years and years and years ago, and it's a way of honoring them. I'm certainly not suggesting we don't support our veterans in this when it comes to these dollars. But somebody else it may come to that also. But I certainly don't support not sending our veterans on the honor flight if we can help in any way.
Ms. Ryan.
Our commissioner, or our chairman's position is, I'm becoming more and more attuned to his position, because this is troubling to me as it goes on. So I don't know what the solution is, but I am becoming more and more troubled by how we are handling these requests. So I'm probably not smart enough to come up with a good solution to this, but I do think we should do something different than we are doing today. And if that means some requests aren't processed through our board, and we recognize that some other people might get that money, so be it. I am becoming more and more troubled. And then the chairman's position is weighing on me more and more heavily with this issue. So, I am looking for some help on how we can address this issue moving forward.
One way, and something we talked about before that might do that, we actually talked about supporting 2% grants for those entities, be they 501c3s or not, that support, that we support in other ways. We support the Leelanau Family Coordinating Council. We give some money to the Clean Water. There are a number of groups that we actually do support nominally, not with large dollars, but couldn't we look at maybe expanding to include those groups as one way of getting our hands around this? That would be the emergency responders and anyone else that we have actually, that are kind of like our extended governmental family. That would seem to be legitimate because we're already providing that. And the only other thing I want to comment is, and I think it's an obvious, Commissioner Rushton really made my point. We do what we do because it honors our veterans, not because we have to do it or because we've set some other criteria. So that's the only other thing I wanted to say. But I think we really should give some thought to, can we expand this to those groups that we already do contribute a little bit of funding to?
I'm where you
Yeah, I'm done.
I guess that's where I would like to encourage us to get together with Grand Traverse County and see if we can, whenever it can happen, we can help the state and encourage the state to renegotiate this thing so that it's more in line with other, other contracts with other tribes, and to me that would really help us with all our decisions. If that contract could be renegotiated and become clearer, because I don't want them to be violating it. I don't want us to be violating it. I really would like it all to be worked out together, and I don't know if this board is willing to do that, but I do think that would be something we could talk to Grand Traverse about. Commissioner Lotter.
I certainly would encourage you to try to do that if at all possible. Take that avenue. See if we can begin negotiations or dialogue with the state of Michigan. But at the same time, it may also be possible to sit down with them and work out a quasi-agreement for, in the meantime, to come to some kind of agreement where because I know Grand Traverse has also been frustrated with this, and they've done the same thing that we did for a few years, is just throw everything at the wall, and it's going to senior parties and dance lessons and all sorts of things that I think was not the intention in the beginning. So maybe we could get just a local agreement that would work for both counties with the tribe. In the meantime, it's a thought.
Commissioner West.
And I too would support working with Grand Traverse County and doing that. And in the meantime, because things move slowly, I would suggest that we limit our approval for 2% grants to emergency services and emergency family needs.
Were there any other discussions? Yes, Commissioner Rushton.
I have a question in regards to, does the health department have the opportunity to request 2% funding?
Does the health department?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or statements? Okay, then,
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
say that I also support working with Grand Traverse County and looking at the opportunity for the state to give us some clear directions on the existing compact and to renegotiate this contract or review this contract so that we have a clearer picture on how this is supposed to function.
I mean, would this board authorize, someone, well, I mean, I'm willing to do it, but I mean, or the administrator or someone to talk with Grand Traverse County?
Well, here's a suggestion. The
Yeah.
three of us are at the airport commissioning with the chairman of Grand Traverse County and the administrator. Maybe that would be a good time to have a side discussion.
Yeah.
Since there'll be two commissioners from Grand Traverse, two from Leelanau, both administrators are there. And that's coming up in a couple weeks. So we could have a discussion, come back in October and see if they're interested.
Maybe we can look at setting a date where
Yeah,
we can sit
yeah,
down and have a
yeah,
conversation.
Would that be okay with
You want a
this board?
motion?
Yes, I think we should, just so.
It's on the record?
Yes.
I move to recommend that the County Board of Commissioners approve the chairman, and Commissioner Rushton and the county administrator to open a dialogue with Grand Traverse County in regards to proper procedures associated with 2% grants.
Support.
Any other comments? Commissioner Wesson?
I think it's important that we do it with Grand Traverse County and not try to do it on our own.
Exactly.
I think we need to proceed carefully with this and do it in a respectful way.
I appreciate that. Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. So then that brings us to review of financials. Commissioner Long?
I had one particular one, I have a question on, I guess. No. All right.
Claims or post-audit?
Claims and accounts.
Page 5.
This one. Yeah, I know it was 5 or 6, so it is 5. So for business card, and this is the sheriff expenditure for $500. Can we legally pay that, or do we have to request that those are not specific? So in other words, if the usage of those changes and isn't limited to a certain portion of our population, can we pay this? Or if it's limited to only a portion of the population, should we not? Do we have an opinion on that?
At
No.
this time, there isn't a legal opinion. The information has not been forwarded to the attorneys. It has been given and gone in front of the audit firm, and the audit firm believes that the clerk's office should proceed with a legal opinion. The spot it puts us in is that this was used on a credit card.
Oh, so it's already been,
It has not been paid, it's been held.
credit card bill has not been paid.
Correct.
We did talk to Mr. Cole about this, and he asked the clerk for more information. So we've had dialogue with our legal counsel. I don't believe she has followed up.
Correct. We have not forwarded the information just yet.
What page, Melinda?
5.
We're talking about those tokens that the sheriff
at the
distributed
top.
last month.
Commissioner Wesson?
Would it be wise to pull it until we get a legal opinion? That would be my recommendation.
I'm just wondering that it would be we'd have to pay penalty and interest on the credit card probably, or at least interest, if we don't pay
I
it.
believe we're past that due date anyway.
We are past that due date.
Okay,
So if you pull it, it doesn't impact that because we're past the due date. It has not been paid.
okay. And is my understanding is because he only gives these to certain people who do good deeds, he doesn't give it to everyone, they're not for general people, that makes it a problem. Because and I'm talking about the sheriff. He's giving them to the deputies, but they're only to give them to certain people who do good deeds.
So your recommendation is?
I move that we remove the item, the $501.50, until we get a legal opinion.
Second.
Commissioner Rushton.
I have a question. In regards to some of those incidentals that we purchase. One in particular is the cherry pies that we all receive. Is that
I
something?
pay bills myself.
You pay for those yourself?
Just very
And that was my question. When we we give a plaque or anything like that we give to certain people, would that fall under the same?
And that's why we don't get plaques anymore.
Yep.
Okay,
No,
plaques or
it's-
trophies
We
or?
have not done that.
Certificates,
Okay.
but there's really no cost to certificates.
There was a court ruling,
Yeah.
2002, it was related to an intermittent school district and how they were allocating public funds. And it basically is, we as a commissioner, if someone passes away, we cannot send flowers, use tax dollars, use that as an example. If someone retires, we can't buy them a gift using tax dollar funds. It has to be, for example, with your pie, if I were to charge that, which I've never have done, that pie would have to be available for everyone in the community to have a piece of.
Right, exactly.
But it has to be equally for all taxpayers. It is legal, for example, to have coffee here.
I
because
didn't
that's
even share mine
open
with
to
my
the
husband.
public.
Right.
But we can't buy coffee just for the commissioners, for example. I just use that example. So that's where the question of these tokens has come in, because that's not open to everyone. It is the opinion of the clerk, and she's not here, but I think you'd verify that this may not be a legal purchase of
That is
legal
correct.
use of tax dollars.
That is correct. The clerk was away at a conference, and I forwarded the information to the audit firm.
So my next question is, if the sheriff were to use these poker chips as some sort of general advertisement for the sheriff's department, that would be okay?
I couldn't give you that determination, but it would be probably no different than treated as, I believe he gives out stickers.
Okay.
You know, so rolls of
So
stickers.
the
NICO
problem
trading
here
cards.
is,
Yeah, NICO trading cards, those are paid from NICO donations, right. So
Okay.
this wasn't a generated donation for this purchase to then be used as an award system,
Okay.
is how the memo reads. I know right here in claims, it does state, per the memorandum, that even though the sheriff's logo is on it, it's for members of the community who are exhibited acts of kindness, selflessness, and community service, and are not meant as a general PR
well,
item.
the reason I ask about this, because I know when I was on the fire department, we as first responders would have teddy bears or different little items that we would distribute randomly.
I believe currently the sheriff has those items donated, is what
Yes.
I was told. So that the teddy bears or the little wolves or beanie babies, those are all dedicated, donated items, stuffed animals to his department to give to children in an accident situation and so forth.
Right.
Yeah.
But in the early days, that may not have been necessarily true.
That's true, yes.
Yes.
And I can understand the objective behind the sheriff's position on this, because there are citizens in the community who stand out and do wonderful things, as Mrs. Janik did when she observed that horrific car accident and was traumatized by what she witnessed. You know, so I could see a situation where a poker chip would be given to Mrs. Janik for the service that she provided to the citizen on the road. So it's really, I understand the letter of the law has to be followed here. However, there is that, it's unfortunate that we cannot recognize our citizens for their efforts of heroic efforts.
Yes, if
Well-
someone donated funds, then
Right,
you
so
had,
this-
you had a donated line item as a revenue for donations for awards, you certainly could, but by how this looks, is it's tax dollars. Until you have a legal opinion, it's tax
Sure.
dollars being utilized for only certain citizens of your
Oh,
large
sure, and I
population.
understand
Yeah,
that totally.
yeah.
So has this been recommended to the sheriff? That
Yes, he's well aware of this.
Okay, so.
There's a
okay.
difference of opinion, let's just leave it at that. But I think the best way to settle this is have Michelle forward information to the legal counsel, have to make a judgment. Our auditor said they will go by whatever the legal counsel says. What we don't want to do, you know, and it's a minor thing, we don't want to get a situation where it will be a finding in our audit. And the
Oh.
auditor's made it clear, it doesn't matter if it's $500 or $5.
Or 5
We have-
cents.
Or 5
Correct.
cents. So they are simply saying they will defer to whoever legal opinion we have. We did talk to Mr. Cole last week about it. Michelle, I think, is in the process of getting the
Getting all the information together, yeah.
And so I suggest, I think correctly, pull it and just wait till we get that legal opinion and have it resolve itself.
Sure.
A few administrators ago, we had an administrator that wanted to borrow the county's little lawn fertilizer spreader just to run home and do his lawn quick, and it was only for a little bit and no big deal, right? Because he'll just use it and bring it back. And I said, you can't, unless we're going to let everybody in the county borrow it and take it home and spread fertilizer on their lawn, you can't do it. He was very angry, but that's the way it is. And
that's why I have Jerry Cole do my lawn himself.
that's right. If Jerry does yours, we see him trucking down there with the tractor. I've
Okay,
noticed.
so was that a motion on the floor? Did you want to, sorry, you
Well, we're not
treated
doing
it as...
motions yet, we're just at discussion.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure, because I believe Allison has a motion on the floor to remove this with legal opinion.
Yes.
So does she need to vote? Do you need to vote?
We can't
Keep
vote at
going
this
on.
point. We-
Okay.
That's coming up
Yeah.
further
Right now, we're under review financials.
Okay.
We're not getting down to claims and accounts yet.
So the motion's going to transfer on her minutes down to claims?
Yes.
I just want to make sure. Okay.
Go ahead.
If I may, okay. I've noticed this in the past, that EMS has a lunch items for LEPC, LPT meetings.
Those are grant dollars from the
They
grant.
are, okay,
That
I just-
specifically says that lunch will be provided.
Yes,
That's,
okay.
part of the grant process. So.
Okay, I
Once again,
thought
no
so.
county tax dollars are being spent on it.
That one jumps out at me every once in a while, so, all right. I think that was all I had.
Any other financial? So then we would move on to special reports by staff or commissioners or anyone? Commissioner?
I just wanted to make everyone aware that the governor, in her bold action to protect the Michigan kids from harmful effects of vaping, has banned this in Michigan. So, just so you all know, it's on her, it's within her vision of the harmful effects to our kids. And I also saw where there is some maybe legal work being done in regards to the way these companies have advertised their products. So
It's having an effect.
it's having an effect, which is a good thing.
If you remember, just quickly on that topic, remember last year when our speaker here told, with all the schools, he predicted that the vaping will have a tremendous impact on lungs.
Oh,
Kids,
yeah.
much more than the actual smoke. And for the first time this month, there's been 2 documented cases of deaths because of vaping. So everything he's predicting, And yesterday was a lengthy article in the Wall Street Journal about the impact of vaping on lungs. So it's not so much the nicotine, it's the impact it's having long-term on lungs. And young people using it, especially when their lungs are not fully developed, could have dire consequences.
It's lipoid pneumonia that these children are.
It's just amazing.
And
Yes.
speaking of that,
People put that in their body.
Lisa Peacock sent me some information that I'm going to pass out to all of you because you asked last week, and
Yes.
she just got it to me and I haven't had a chance to forward it to you.
Right.
So she did follow up on that.
And what this is the oils, whether it be the marijuana oils or the oils in the flavorings that they put in these vaping tools. This liquid is getting in the lungs of our children. The more they vape, the more lipoids they're putting in the lungs, which restrict the capacity of breathing, and evidently they can't reverse this and they die. So, just so parents will know.
Any other reports? Seeing none, then we'll come to public comment. Please come forward.
So Barb Conley, C-O-N-L-E-Y, Leelanau Township. I just want to make a couple of quick comments. One is that I hope the county will find it helpful to support things that do help the entire community, whether with 2% or not. And you know, a couple of things that come to mind are, you know, working to increase the health of the population by trying to increase the providers in the county, mental health providers and physical health providers, making it possible for the workforce to actually live here in Leelanau County, and then the substance abuse issues, helping to build out on that, and it seems that vaping has now become one of those substance abuse issues. The second comment I want to make is to thank you for bringing up the Ironman traffic snafus, because my concern is that people who have need to get into Traverse City from Leelanau County couldn't do it. They could be sick, it could be EMS, they could have other pressing needs to do so. And so I think while looking at was it legal and it should be done in a legal way, it also should be done in a way that allows people to get out of Leelanau County and back into Leelanau County during events such as these. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Gwen Allgaier, Cleveland. I have a concern about those pies. I think it would be great for you to put a brief in the Enterprise and say, there's cherry pie.
I agree. We all should get a piece.
As a citizen, I support that.
There's something healthier offered today.
And by the way, I waited for an hour to get out of Leelanau County that day. And it was for a memorial. Fortunately, it was a long-term memorial. I'm sure that person didn't plan their deaths so that I couldn't get to them. I'm sorry. I'm not going to say what I wanted to say. I am, as a citizen, I am very proud of Leelanau County's inception and heritage. Our very first act, I believe it was 1864, was to allocate $5,000 for the widows of Civil War soldiers. That was a lot of money back then. Our first act. And then until around 1920, we had 3 supervisors of the poor in this county. That is what the commission did, was provide for the welfare of the needy people in this county. That's what we did. It was the first topic at every commission meeting for 55 years. That is our heritage.
That is what we did. And that's the right thing to do, is to make sure the least among us are not suffering. Because stuff happens in life. It happens to every single one of us. Tragedies strike. People lose jobs. People become ill. As Christians, that is who we are, that we provide for those who are experiencing a tragedy or a difficult time. After the federal government acted, we withdrew, said, okay, these people are fine. Well, things aren't fine. There are lots of instances where people, I don't need to go into that. We still have the needy. What we do have in Leelanau County is an army of people willing to help because we're good people. We have an army of volunteers. And we have people who are willing to work through nonprofits to do what the county used to do, what our foundation was. And now I hear that we don't think we should help those armies of volunteers do what we used to do. And I don't understand that. I don't understand that. How can we abandon who we are and ignore our heritage and ignore those who are needy among us? As a citizen of this county, this is a better place to live when I know people aren't starving. When I know someone is not being kicked out of their home because they had a car crash and they have inadequate insurance and they need some help. That makes all of our life better here, and this county knew it for 55 years. And I encourage you to expand your view. First responders, boy, when you help somebody who's in trouble, you're a first responder. And I don't think we should categorize that trouble just to being in a car accident or needing to go to the hospital. The needy, we have an opportunity to respond to, and that's our heritage. Please keep that in mind.
Thank you very much. Is there any other one? Any other comment? Please. Eric Carlson from the Leelanau Enterprise. The vote you took on the 2%, it just so happens, was the recommendation we made in an editorial I wrote Friday for this week's paper.
Wow.
Just saying, you scooped me. So the other thing that you should be aware of, in addition to what's in the editorial, is that, you know, the plain language of the 1993 consent decree and the stipulation associated with it is very clear, is that the money, the 2% money, must go to units of government in the, quote, immediate vicinity of the casinos for governmental services. This is the plain language of it. After the first year, when the tribe figured out, no, we don't just have to send the check to Leelanau County, they figured out we could send this money anywhere we want, and they did. And that was when we started getting money going to all kinds of nonprofits everywhere within the 6-county service area that were providing services to tribal members directly. About a decade ago, when Suttons Bay Township routinely rubber-stamped requests from Leelanau Christian neighbors to get 2% money, that was the one time we heard from the Michigan Game and Control Board that was unlawful. Was not in compliance with the 2% agreement. And that's when Suttons Bay Township told Leelanau Christian neighbors, we can't help you anymore on that, and then they came here. And everybody said, oh, well, we'd be stupid not to do that. So what the units of government in the immediate vicinity of the 2 casinos, Grand Traverse County, Turtle Creek, and Leelanau Sands, Leelanau County. Within those are other units of government in the immediate vicinity of the tribal casino. Suttons Bay Township, other units of government that Suttons Bay Public Schools, Whitewater Township over in Grand Traverse County. So they all had a dog in this fight. But it would probably behoove the county governments to talk about this first, to get a readout on exactly where all the 2% money has been going since 1994, when the first payouts were made, and seeing whether they comply with the plain language of the stipulation associated with the 1993 consent decree. I think anybody from the Michigan Gaming Control Board who's sent lawyers up to talk to the tribe about it will say, no, they really haven't been. Nobody has since said we need to take a harder look at this and maybe clarify the agreement. A window passed in 2013, the 20-year mark. Every 5 years, there's another opportunity to take another look at it. It applies not just to the Grand Traverse Band, it's 5 other tribes. There are other compacts with other sets of tribes, but there were 6 tribes associated with that initial 1993 consent decree. And once they figured, that was the first one. When they figured out this one isn't working, they did it differently for other tribes and other units of government in the state. This one has not been renegotiated. Windows open every 5 years. You get a year before, then it will be 2022 when you get another opportunity to start looking at it. Find out, get a readout on exactly what's been paid out since 1994, whether those payouts comported with the consent, with the stipulation in the 1993 consent judgment, and maybe you have a case. And the money needs to go to units of government in the immediate vicinity of the tribal casinos for governmental services. That's very clear in the stipulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please come forward.
Tricia Denton, Cleveland Township, and resident of the citizen of the county, and I just have an interesting opportunity that I wanted to share with the board about. As you know, since the formation of Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore almost 50 years ago, our community has seen significant impacts from tourism, economic impacts, environmental impacts, housing impacts, workforce impacts. There's an opportunity on September 24th being hosted by the Sleeping Bear Gateways Council. They're sponsoring a conference being held in Glen Arbor, and they're seeking, they have a keynote speaker named Destry Jarvis, who's a consultant specializing in policy and management of units of the National Park System, cultural resource management, tourism marketing, and other gateway community topics. And he will be speaking in Glen Arbor at the Township Hall, doing a workshop for municipal organizations, nonprofit groups, and residents from 3:30 to 5 p.m. on September 24th. I would encourage you, we are all being impacted. We are living in a gateway community to a national lakeshore, and it's important to, I think, coordinate services, talk about impacts from first responders. How many people had to get rescued off the face of the number 9 overlook this summer, let alone pressures on our water and our workforce and other affordable housing for our residents. So those are some of the issues that we covered at this, and I encourage you to attend and let people in your various districts know about this opportunity and encourage them to participate and attend as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to commissioner comments.
I was at a picnic at Peterson Park on Labor Day, and there was a medical emergency. And the Leelanau Township responders got there, did a really nice job. But getting them there was a challenge because there's no cell service. And I'm just wondering if maybe you as a representative of the commission and you, Jed, as a part of the 911 group, might consider 911 boxes at those facilities, either township or county, that don't have emergency signal for 911.
Just like the old days when we used to have the fire poles, on the light poles.
Yeah, because that was scary.
Through a landline?
Any other commissioner comment?
Scary.
Seeing none, then we'd move on to, are there any amendments and transfers? I don't see any. And then we move to claims and accounts.
So I recommend approval of claims and accounts, $39,992.12.
That's not the number that
No,
I...
that's-
I know, that's minus the $500 for the.
That is.
And I think you missed my one digit, 993.
I had 992. 992? Well, we'll have the correct amount Tuesday night for sure. So this is just a recommendation. We'll leave it at that.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to post audit.
I would recommend approval of post audit $4,964,012.54.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We are adjourned.
What time was it?
Well, it says 12:30.
You have lunch here, so.
I know.